Marvel. Unlimited possession at the beginning. Chapter 61. It should be fine. In the kitchen, Li Ran took the time to open the steamer. When he opened the lid, the first thing that came to his face was a strong aroma, and Li Ran could even see a dazzling light flashing from the steamer. Of course, it could also be just his delusion. After all, this is the world of Maiman and not the world of China's little master. Shaking his head and sweeping away the absurd thoughts in his heart, Li Ran turned his attention back to the dishes in the steamer. On the green lettuce leaves, the steaming dim sum dishes were constantly attracting Li Ran's eyes, even if the dim sum came from his own hands. Looking at the delicate dishes in the steamer, Li Ran swallowed subconsciously. Golden ratio xiaomai. Looking at the fragrant dishes in the steamer, Li Ran murmured its name. That's right, the dish that Li Ran cooked was the dish that Xie Lu made his first appearance in the duel with the young master in The Little Master of China. Although, in the plot of the animation, the golden ratio xiaomai of Xie Lu lost to the universe big xiaomai made by the Little Master. However, rather than saying that Lu Angxing defeated Xie Lu in cooking, it is more that Xie Lu finally admitted defeat. As the perfect result of the many years of experience researched by Jia Lu, the golden ratio xiaomai is close to the level of perfect cooking in terms of taste and appearance. However, in the face of a situation that was sure to be defeated, the young master was able to quickly conceive of an unprecedented novel and bold dish like Cosmos Big Xiaomai to turn the situation around. It made Xie Lu willingly admit defeat, thinking that he has been surpassed by the young master in terms of cooking attainments. Not to mention the cooking plot in the animation. For the time being, the aroma of xiaomai in front of him has been arousing the greed in Li Ran's stomach. Reaching out, he picked up a simmered wheat and put it in his mouth. The sweetness of vegetables, the lusciousness of pork, and the freshness of shrimps burst out in Li Ran's mouth. Unfortunately, without the oily but not greasy smooth taste of Jinhua ham as the finishing touch, this xiaomai cannot be regarded as a 100% perfect, golden ratio xiaomai. Shaking his head, perhaps because of the character card of Xie Lu hanging on Li Ran at the moment, as a superior pastry chef, he can easily perceive the missing part of the cooking. Limited by the material, although Li Ran's golden ratio xiaomai is equally delicious, it does not actually reach the level of the golden ratio as the name suggests. Shaking his head regretfully, Li Ran solved the remaining xiaomai in the steamer. Just how should the character of Xie Lu be used? After eating the food and returning to reality from the world of food, Li Ran couldn't help falling into contemplation as he watched Xie Lu in the system. Although it is not a battle-related card, there is no doubt about the ability of Jia Lu as a superior pastry chef. It is a bit too wasteful to simply keep it in my own hands. What's more, as a black iron treasure chest to open it. The D-level card that came out, Li Ran didn't forget that this card was worth 1,000 legends, so he couldn't just let it go. No, I have to figure out a way. Li Ran frowned and glanced casually in the kitchen. Suddenly, his eyes were fixed on the empty steamer in front of him. Or, I can. Looking at the steamer in front of him, Li Ran suddenly had a bold idea in his mind. 3 days later, on the streets of New York, a brand new red food truck appeared on the street, disagreeing with the big and small hamburgers and hot dogs on the streets of New York. From the observation of the internal structure of this dining car, it can be seen that what it sells is obviously Chinese dim sum dishes. Especially the stacked bamboo steamers in the dining car, for many Americans, they are cooking utensils that can only be seen in movies or Chinatown. Although the kitchen utensils are unfamiliar, the aroma wafting from them continues to attract pedestrians on the street to turn their heads. During the period, most of the pedestrians shook their heads and left after seeing the aroma of the food truck. For some people, it still takes a lot of courage to challenge a new dish that they have never tasted before. However, there are also people who are attracted by the aroma from the dining car and take the courage to step forward. Hey, buddy, what kind of food are you selling here? The first customer who came to the door was a bald black man with a full foodie figure. He twisted his plump buttocks and glanced into the food truck. Dim sum dishes, specific dishes, I have written on the signboard. At this time, a bronze-colored man emerged from the dining car. He was tall and had a long scar on the left side of his face. He spoke in unskilled Chinese English. The burly appearance of the owner of the dining car surprised the black man standing outside, but soon his attention was attracted by the dishes on the signboard. Not because of the name, but purely because of the price of the food. Dude, you are robbing money. Pointing to the price on the signboard, the bald black man shouted excitedly, "The price of $10 is a bit too much for a food truck. It's a bit expensive, and you're not at the entrance of any scenic spot." As a street food, most food trucks in New York are generally priced at $3 to $6. The few expensive ones are also the food trucks that are already well known. Like this one that has never been seen before, the high price of $10 is all of a sudden. It's no wonder that this black man is so excited. As an expert who has eaten most of Manhattan's food trucks, I think you should adjust the price of these dishes, at least by more than half. You can choose not to eat. Faced with the endless advice of the black man in front of him, the owner of the food truck was not very appreciative but replied impatiently. Quote. Choked by the words of the owner of the dining car, the bald black man's face froze, and he wanted to turn around and leave. However, the close-up aroma in front of the dining car kept disintegrating his not-so-firm determination. Although he thought he had tasted a lot of food, he also had to admit that the new food truck in front of him was indeed very attractive. Standing in front of the dining car and struggling for a while, in the end, appetite prevailed, and the black man continued to mumble, but his body had already honestly pulled out $10 in cash from his pocket, pointed to the sign and read out the somewhat convoluted words above. The name of the food in the mouth. "Give me a golden ratio shawmai. Take the roasted wheat." First of all, the distinctive shape of golden ratio shawmai attracted the attention of guests. Looking at the steaming delicate dessert in his hand, the black guest felt somewhat comforted, at least the appearance of the dish seemed worthy of his $10. However, the most important thing is the taste. Muttering in a low voice, the bald black man carefully put the shawmai in his hand into his mouth. Ah, hot, hot. With a weak posture different from the appearance, he snorted a few times and felt the taste of shawmai in his mouth. The black man's eyes suddenly widened, as if he was in a vast forest. "It's outstanding. This shumai is really outstanding. Shrimp still retains its elasticity after being ground into mud. The delicious vegetables are full of refreshing taste, the soft sweetness of egg yolk, and the smooth but not greasy taste of pork. The most successful part of this siamai lies in these four: the balance between the weights of the various ingredients. They will not mask the taste of each other, but can be reconciled into one. It all depends on the proportion of the weight. The golden ratio shawmai is well deserved." In one breath, he made a lot of comments like a cannon rap, and the black guest finally came back to his senses like waking up from a dream. He shook his head, feeling as if he was possessed by something for a moment. Although he didn't understand how he made a good food review, the taste of the golden ratio shawmai still left a deep impression on him, and the taste still filled his mouth. "Boss, give me another golden ratio shawmai." Famousness from dining car diners plus 0.05. It seems that cooking not only brings happiness, but also fame. In the antique store, Lee Ran couldn't help but smile as he looked at the refreshed information on the data panel. There is no doubt that the owner of this street food truck in New York is Lee Ran's avatar. With the bald black man as the first customer to try, the business of the food truck has obviously become much smoother. Although the price of $10 is not cheap, it is still much cheaper than going to a restaurant for a meal. In addition to the tempting aroma that is constantly emitting from the dining car, very soon, there is a line in front of Lee Ran's dining car, short team. Famousness from dining car diners plus 0.02. Famousness from dining car diners plus 0.04. Famousness from Phil Coulson plus 20. Famousness from dining car diners plus 0.05. Wait a minute, it looks like some weird character has gotten in. After a row of legends came down, the conspicuous 20-point legend immediately attracted Lee Ran's eyes. Looking at the familiar names displayed in the system, Lee Ran immediately swept out the sight of his clone in the dining car. Soon, he found the figure in a suit hiding not far away and secretly tasting shawmai. As a secret agent, Phil quickly realized that someone was paying attention to him. He turned his head to meet the line of sight from his avatar. He smiled slightly and then put on his professional attitude. The shawmai made the 8th level agent from S.H.I.E.L.D. look rather shameless. Why did Agent Phil appear here? Silently withdrawing his gaze, Lee Ran did not think that his clone Xielu could attract the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., so it was obvious that Agent Phil appeared here because of other missions. But what kind of task is it? To be honest, although Agent Phil appeared in the movie as a supporting role alongside the Avengers members such as Tony, in fact, as an 8th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Phil Coulson himself also performed various S.H.I.E.L.D. commands. God knows what mission he is here for this time. Being vigilant about S.H.I.E.L.D. and his own safety, Lee Rand did not let the clone have any contact with Agent Phil. Although the amount of fame given by Agent Phil is considerable, it is far from enough to make Lee Rand take risks, even if the Xielu currently in the food truck is just a clone of him. The next day, because of the appearance of Agent Phil, Lee Rand's plan was disrupted. This time, he deliberately allowed the clone to reopen for business at one intersection from the street from yesterday. Famousness from dining car diners plus 0.03. Famousness from Phil Coulson plus 25. From Lee Rand. Day 3. Famousness from Phil Coulson plus 20. Fourth day. Famousness from Phil Coulson plus 30. As the saying goes, there are only 3 things to do. For several days in a row, no matter where Lee Rand asked Xielu to do business, he could encounter Agent Phil, which made him begin to doubt, is the other party really coming for him? But it shouldn't, I obviously didn't show any obvious flaws. In the antique store, Lee Rand was a little suspicious of his life by the repeated appearances of Agent Phil. In front of the food truck, because of the repeated patronage, Agent Phil has obviously assumed the identity of a regular customer. Boss, the taste of your xiaomai is really delicious, but the location changes a little too frequently, no fixed location, every time I have to bother to find where you do business. Is that so? Agent Phil's words fell into Lee Rand's ears, which made him speechless. Feelings, Agent Phil has been chasing him for nothing but the cooking in his hands. It seems that I have overlooked the strength of Xielu as a superior pastry chef. Anyway, this is the xiaomai made by the #1 pastry chef in mainland China. Even if it is limited by the materials, it cannot present 100% cooking. It's delicious, but as a special pastry chef, the dishes made by it are not comparable to other fast food trucks on the streets of New York. Regardless, Lee Rand did not fully believe the reason given by Agent Phil. After all, as an 8th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. who has undergone rigorous training, no matter how delicious the dishes Lee Rand makes, they shouldn't fall into it so easily. Sure enough, he then observed the performance of the other party, especially when a familiar vehicle passed in front of the food truck, Agent Phil. Lee Rand can basically be sure that the purpose of this agent's presence here is basically the same as his. It's all there for some famous New York playboy. It turned out that since this time, S.H.I.E.L.D. has begun to pay attention to Tony. In the antique store, Lee Rand was a little surprised. However, although the goals are the same, the goals of the two sides are very different. Agent Phil obviously represents some kind of concern of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Lee Rand just wants to use Xielu cooking to slay Tony, body legend. Found a new clue about the activities of the hand. Here, Lee Ranxuan's plan for Tony's legend has not yet started. On the other side, the defenders came first with the news. After nearly a week of searching, Matt finally had a new breakthrough. To be precise, I have made a new discovery. Several people gathered at the law firm opened by Matt, and Jessica explained the situation. I went to the man who originally asked me to find the missing case. The owner found some strange dialogues and a photo without any labels on the computer in his study, and continued to search for evidence along these clues, and finally let me find the location of the photo. Following Jessica's words, Matt also shared his findings. Recently, illegal drugs in Hell's Kitchen have been in a strange situation in short supply. After my investigation, I found that a large number of goods were gathered in one place. Upper New York Bay, Jessica and Matt both said at the same time. Upper New York Bay, also known as Upper New York Harbor or Upper Bay, is located in the northern area of New York Harbor within the New York Bay Strait, near the mouth of the Hudson River in Manhattan. It is the largest seaport in the United States and one of the largest in the world. The clone that came back in the form of Ah Shing faced Jessica and Matt's narration, with a blank expression. Go to New York Bay, this is such a place again, where is it? Luke Cage said, it's a port. He explained to Ah Shing, and then expressed his own question. But, what is the reason for the Hand Society to gather in New York Harbor? I haven't investigated their specific purpose, but judging from all the signs, it should be some kind of illegal drug transaction. Shaking his head, Matt was also a little dazed about this. After that time, the traces of the activities of the Hand Society became obviously more secretive, and it was only after a very accidental opportunity that he discovered the signs of their activities in the Upper New York Bay. Jessica, Although I can't find out who the specific trading partner of the hand is, I have already found out the time of their next event. They should trade at the port tomorrow night. Is the source reliable? The news from Jessica was exciting, but Matt asked cautiously. Shaking his head, Jessica herself could not guarantee this. I also accidentally learned from a certain past news channel occasionally, and I cannot be 100% sure of the authenticity of the news. Quote. Jessica's answer caused Matt to be silent for a while, and then he looked up at the defenders in front of him and said, "The next battle may be more dangerous than we thought. Fists and feet have no eyes, so how can you be safe during the battle? Since you have already promised you, it is natural to fight to the end. You must not let an evil organization like the Hand Association continue to exist," said. The various signs in Jessica and Matt's words made Lee Rand feel a hint of conspiracy, but instead of preventing this, he controlled his avatar to join it. Hearing Ah Xing's words, Luke Cage raised his eyebrows, still maintaining his same expression, and replied, "Since we have finally found signs of hand union activity, we can't give up action just because we are worried about danger, let alone now. We have no more clues than the news that the hand will appear in the port tomorrow night for trading." Luke Cage's remarks express the current predicament of the defenders. After all, they are not a professional team, a group of teams that have been put together temporarily. Maybe they are barely okay when facing the battle, the others are. "If you don't go, then I'll do it by myself." Joining the defenders is inherently non-Jessica subjective, so in the face of Matt's struggling performance, she said without hesitation. The words of the defenders made Matt make a decision, suppressed his uneasiness, nodded and said, "Well, tomorrow night, we will go to the port." Tomorrow may be an important turning point for the defenders. In the antique store, looking at everything through his clone, Lee Rand raised his eyebrows with a meaningful expression on his face. The next day, late at night. As the largest seaport in the United States, the Upper New York Bay is in a busy state 24 hours a day, and a large number of containers are piled up at the port, waiting for export or delivery. Bang! With a low voice, Jessica landed on the huge container, frowned and scanned the surrounding situation, then said on the empty container, "I don't find anything here." "Me too." Glancing across the huge containers in front of him, he heard the sound coming from the earphones. A Xing said the same. "It seems that maybe our news is wrong, and the hand meeting did not appear here." Walking through the containers, Luke Cage couldn't help but have doubts. Impossible. Luke Cage's remarks first aroused the dissatisfaction of Jessica on the other side. Although she agreed to join the defenders and act with them, she still did not let go of the previous action. She subconsciously objected in a low voice, and then frowned and said with some confidence, "Although it is the information obtained by accident, there should be a certain degree of authenticity. You said it yourself, this is the news you got by accident, or all this was just made up by the other party to lie to you." Once again, there was no gain, and the news that Luke Cage gave to Jessica became more and more true, of doubts. "Unless he thinks his head is harder than a rock, he shouldn't dare to lie to me with such news." Even through the earphones, I can still feel Jessica's emotions at the moment, which is close to the brink of eruption. "Wait a minute, I have a discovery here." Seeing that the action that the defenders finally gathered together was about to come to an end like this, Matt's slightly solemn voice suddenly sounded in the earphones. "In the east, did I hear a lot of unusual noises? It seems that there are a lot of people gathering, and they are very quiet. This is very unusual, not like a dock worker," he said cautiously. Matt walked in the direction of the sound he heard. "I was discovered by them. I'm a member of the Hand, and they're all here in the east." In the headphones, Matt's discovery also stopped Jessica and Luke Cage, who had been arguing. With Matt's hurried voice, a fierce battle sounded. East. Hearing the battle sound in the earphones, the remaining 3 people at the port immediately stopped their progress and ran towards the direction Matt said. With the advantage of flying, Jessica was the first to arrive at Matt's location. Immediately, he saw the scene where Matt, who looked like Daredevil, was surrounded by hand ninjas. Jessica frowned and was about to go down to help. Boom! I heard the sound of a fierce fight coming from the rear, and then I saw the ninjas of the Hand meeting flying around not far away. Looking at the situation, I saw A Xing wearing a red undershirt appear there. Facing the crowds of the Hand, Ah Xing relied on the powerful leg skills of Dolly's King Kong legs to converge in the direction of Matt. The last one to arrive at the scene, Luke Cage first looked up at Jessica, who was floating in his mouth, then withdrew his gaze to look at the large number of hand-joined ninjas in front of him, moved his body left and right, and pinpointed where Matt was. Ignoring the attacks of the hand ninjas, he rushed into the crowd without hesitation. Seeing one or two members of the defenders coming one after another, Jessica couldn't help but smile, and then fell from the air to join the battle. Throwing off a hand-joined ninja wrapped around him, Luke Cage glanced at Jessica and Axing, who had already joined Matt first, shrugged and said, "Sorry, I'm late." Blocking the slash coming from the front, and kicking the ninja in front of him, Matt stepped back slightly and the three stood in a row. Hearing the words, he replied, "No, you are here at the right time." Turning her head to look at the handheld ninjas who were surrounded by the crowd, Jessica raised her eyebrows and said, "It seems that we are a little too popular, and they have prepared a rather warm welcome for us ceremony." "More than welcome. This is," a hoarse and sharp voice came. Matt turned his head to the side, distinguishing the voice, and said, "It's Mrs. Gao." I saw the hand-glued ninjas who were surrounded by everyone gave way, and Mrs. Gao walked tremblingly in front of the defenders on crutches. "This is the big villain we're going to deal with." Jessica frowned as she looked at Mrs. Gao, who appeared in front of her, and asked Matt beside her with a look of surprise, "An old man who needs a cane to walk?" Mrs. Aside, Luke Cage did not speak, but his expression was quite surprised. "Don't be deceived by her appearance." Facing Mrs. Gao, who appeared again, Ah Xing's face showed a solemn look and said to Jessica and Luke Cage, "I saw him for the first time. When she got to the other side, she wounded Matt with just one palm, an existence that even I was not sure of defeating. If my inference is correct, Mrs. Gao should be one of the 5 leaders of the Hand Society, the immortal existence in your mouth." The warnings from Ah Xing and Matt made Jessica quickly restrain her contempt, especially the second half of Matt's words, which made her more vigilant. "Looks like you know more than I thought." Hearing Matt's ability to live forever, Mrs. Gao's expression changed slightly, and then she put away the smile on her face. "I was negligent, the long years have made me excessively slack, and even forgot the key point is that the so-called embankment of 1,000 miles is destroyed by the ant nest." "What is she saying?" The second half of Mrs. Gao's common saying was spoken in Chinese, and apart from her avatar, no one else knew what she meant. Jessica frowned, subconsciously turned her head to look at the Chinese face with the same black hair as Mrs. Gao, and asked, "She's saying we're ants." In this regard, Li Ran answered Jessica's question with a fairly simple explanation. Nodding her head, Jessica looked back at Mrs. Gao, who was in front of her, twisted her neck and said, "Then tell her, I'm not an ordinary ant, and it will hurt a lot if I bite her. I can understand English." "Little girl." Facing Jessica's provocative reaction, Mrs. Gao raised her head and replied, "Little girl." Mrs. Gao's words made Jessica raise her eyebrows subconsciously. "You may think you are strong, but in fact, in my opinion, all this is just a disguise for you to cover up the painful scars of your past, those memories that you have always wanted to forget but have never been able to." Quote, "What do you know?" Mrs. Gao's words obviously touched a memory that Jessica never wanted to recall, and she became excited. "I know more than you think." Seeing this, Mrs. Gao smiled slightly. This is not because Mrs. Gao said that as an evil organization all over the world, it is based on ninjas. The Hand Association has a huge news channel. Even if the organization in New York has not developed for a long time, it can still inquire about some ordinary people. Information. "Tell me, did you know about Kilgray and where he is?" Jessica. Luke Cage frowned and looked at Jessica, who was a little out of control. Don't be irritated by her. Clearly, however, his words did nothing. Under Mrs. Gao's provocation, Jessica had completely forgotten the purpose of their trip, and rushed towards Mrs. Gao in front of her regardless. However, in the face of Jessica, who was rushing towards her, Mrs. Gao's expression did not show a trace of panic. She saw that she gently lifted the crutches in her hand, turned her hand and swept forward, and Jessica, who rushed over, fell back as if hit by an invisible force. Raising his hand and catching the flying figure, Ah Xingyun lifted his strong Vajra legs and took a deep footprint on the ground to offset the huge force from Jessica, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. "Look, I had said that she's not easy, why are you rushing forward so impulsive?" "Feel sorry." Compared with Matt, although he was also attacked by Mrs. Gao, it is obvious that Jessica's body is more capable of fighting, and was not knocked down by this blow. Instead, he woke up from the previous chaotic emotions. If it wasn't because the power to maintain immortality in the body began to gradually weaken. Seeing Jessica, who was still fine after taking a blow from herself, Mrs. Gao couldn't help but secretly said something. Just like what she and the skinny old man said in the financial company in the Midtown Circle, the power of immortality is fading. Fortunately, she was not the only ninja who came to the port this time. Above the container, a man in a black tights appeared there, watching the defenders surrounded by hand unions. Jin Bing, let me bring you a precious gift. As the man's voice fell, the tightly closed container was suddenly opened from the inside out, and a group of figures who were very different from the hand ninja came out of the container. Be careful. Turning his ears, noticing the unusual changes around the port, Matt couldn't help but remind his companions. You don't need to say it, we all saw it. Jessica rubbed her aching chest and pouted. So many people ran out of the container, so many people, as long as the eyes are not blind, said casually. Jessica noticed Matt and the team, and then stopped. I'm sorry, I'm not talking about you. Quote. It doesn't matter. Matt shook his head. He had long been used to the darkness, and with the help of super senses, his daily life was not much different from that of ordinary people. Hey guys, I don't think it's a good time for you guys to talk about this kind of thing. The opening interrupted the conversation between Jessica and Matt. Luke Cage looked at the crowd gradually surrounded by guns in front of him. I think we are in big trouble. Although he himself is not too afraid of the firearms in these people's hands because of his invulnerability, not everyone in the Defenders ignores the threat of bullets like him, so in the face of this situation, Luke Cage came forward going to the front of the team. He did not forget to say, wait a minute, when facing a fire attack, try to dodge behind me as much as possible. At this time, Jessica did not bicker with Luke Cage again. She looked at the densely surrounded crowd, and couldn't help but say, then you have to be careful. Turning his head and looking at the members of the Defenders behind him, Luke Cage smiled and said, don't worry, I'm invulnerable. Leave them all here for me. Coming to Bullseye on crutches, Mrs. Gao looked at the Defenders surrounded by Han and Jin Bing, and said with a cold face. Don't worry, they can't escape. Nodding his head, Bullseye conveyed indifferently, Jin Bian hopes to get Daredevil's mask as one of his collections. I don't care about Kim Bing's thoughts, I just hope to get a result that satisfies me. Here, Mrs. Gao and Bullseye have all assumed the victorious attitude. On the other side, in the face of the crowd that surrounded them, the expressions of the Defenders and his party seemed a little dignified. Fire! In the crowd, following an order from someone unknown, Jin Bing's men immediately picked up the firearms in their hands and fired at several people. What sound? At the port, the night workers noticed the unusual sound and wanted to go over to check the situation. If you don't want to die, treat it as if I didn't hear it. This is not something we can participate in. This is, a white man who is suspected to be the lead supervisor stopped the worker who wanted to go and find out. He turned his head and looked at it. A glance at the direction of the fierce gunfire. I can only tell you, this is what Jin Bian explained. Although Jin Bing often appears as a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist in New York news media reports, most workers in the port know that behind these identities, the true face of the underworld emperor, who often enters and leaves New York Harbor, there are several large ships, among which there are special ones in charge of gold and business. Therefore, looking at each other silently, the workers immediately gave up their past plans. They are just ordinary people and don't want to get involved in anything related to Jin Bing. Bang, bang. Raising his hands to protect his eyes, Luke Cage moved forward step by step with strong firepower. The sturdy bullet of the submachine gun hit him, as if it was hit on steel, without leaving the slightest scar. You didn't say that there is one of them who can stop the bullet. The scene of Luke Cage blocking the bullet changed Bullseye's indifferent expression slightly. He turned to look at Madame Gao beside him and questioned. Although that big guy can stop bullets, it doesn't mean that people with him can also stop bullets at a glance. Ignoring Bullseye's question, Mrs. Gao reminded herself. Hearing Mrs. Gao's words, Bullseye turned his gaze back to Luke Cage, who was not far away. His powerful dynamic vision made him immediately see Matt and others hiding behind Luke Cage. As Mrs. Gao said, not everyone can ignore the threat of bullets. Let me help you. Muttering in his mouth, Bullseye suddenly waved his arms, and a few ordinary cards in his hand turned into sharp weapons and flew towards the people behind Luke Cage. The pitch-dark night and the loud gunfire around gave Bullseye the best cover. Notice. Waiting for Matt to notice these poker cards, it was already a little late. He reluctantly turned his body to avoid a flying poker card. The sharp poker left a deep scar on his face, but Matt didn't have time to pay attention to it. He shouted to Jessica and axing behind him, "Be careful of these playing cards that are flying under control." What? The violent gunshots that kept ringing around made Matt's voice faint. Noticing Matt's movement in front of him, Jessica raised her head subconsciously. However, at this moment, another playing card thrown from Bullseye's hand flew over. "Be careful." With a reminder, Jessica only felt herself being pushed forward suddenly. Turning his head, he saw that a Shing, who was standing behind him to cover, was hit by something, and one staggered and fell from behind Luke Cage, exposed to powerful firepower. Axing. Seeing this scene, whether it was Luke Cage or Jessica who stood in the front, couldn't help but blurt out. Jessica stopped immediately and wanted to rush back again. "No, Jessica." Grabbing Jessica's arm with a backhand, Luke Cage faced the denser bullets in front of him, and gritted his teeth in a trembling voice and said, "At this time, we can only move on." In the antique store, Lee Ran's expression was also solemn. In fact, the moment the bullseye poker hit the avatar, he began to feel the chakra, which maintains the avatar, vibrate violently. Even, almost unable to maintain the state of avatar. Lee Ran knew very well that if the avatar was broken at this time, then his efforts during this period of time were likely to be in vain, so he quickly contacted another avatar who played the role of a phantom thief, and ran chakra to maintain Zing's avatar. Fortunately, under the hazy night, it was impossible to see the fact that the bullet hit the clone without leaving any blood. The last scene Jessica and the others saw was just the scene where Ah Xing staggered to stand up against the bullets, and finally fell down and was submerged by the handheld ninjas. The legend from Daredevil +700. Famous from Jessica Jones +850. From Luke Cage's legend +1120. Sure enough, the more profound the impression left, the higher the final degree of fame. In the antique shop, the chakra, who maintained the clone, was released. Lee Ran looked at the far more numbers on the system data panel and analyzed it secretly. Regarding Ah Xing's exit, he has already written the script. First, he needs to use this to verify whether his conjecture about the popularity is correct. Second, as the number of cards in hand increases, he naturally needs to give up some secondary card. Of course, theoretically speaking, Axing, as the most powerful card in Lee Ran's hands, should not have entered the fate of being eliminated so early. However, the timing was so coincidental. The appearance of Mrs. Gao in Bullseye and the situation in the port gave Lee Ran the perfect time to exit. Now that the time and place are right and the people are there, he also took advantage of the situation to perform the scene that Jessica and others saw at the end. Although the process was a bit rushed, the results were undoubtedly in line with Lee Ran's expectations. The popularity given by the members of the Defenders also fully illustrates this point. It can be regarded as a reward for the perfect curtain call for the role of Axing. Famousness from Mrs. Gao +100. Legend from Bullseye +90. It seems that they should have found something wrong. At this moment, the two legends that emerged from the data panel made Lee Ran slightly raise his eyebrows. The figure who had fallen in the siege suddenly disappeared. No wonder Madame Gao and Bullseye were surprised and gave Lee Ran so much fame. However, it is their business to be surprised. Anyway, Lee Ran has already obtained the legendary degree that should be taken. Looking at the hundreds of legendary figures on the system data panel, Lee Ran's heart began to stir. The accumulated fame has long been enough for Lee Ran to redeem once. No, it is 2 opportunities to open the black iron treasure chest. However, thinking of the previous battle in the port, Lee Ran immediately suppressed the thought of exchanging the treasure chest in his heart. No, at present, instead of rushing to open the treasure chest to draw D-rank cards, it is better to accumulate all these legends and bet on the things in the bronze treasure chest. In the battle at the port, although Lee Ran wanted to withdraw, it could not be ignored. The threat of Mrs. Gao's hand and Bullseye's group, facing the threat of powerful firepower, was drawn as a D-rank card. The Axing can't have much effect at all. Moreover, this is just a joint attack of the hand and Bullseye. Compared with the scene of alien invasions and Dormammu swallowing the earth on the streets of New York in the future, if Lee Ran still thinks about using Axing like this to face the card of the level is simply a matter of fantasy. Therefore, accumulating more fame and constantly opening treasure chests to extract character cards with higher combat power is what Lee Ran should do at present. No, it should be said that he wants to survive to the end in the crisis-ridden world of Maiman. Here, Lee Ran is contemplating the future development direction. On the other side, the defenders who escaped from the port were exhausted physically and mentally. Ah Xing's sacrifice was a big blow to everyone. This is especially true for Jessica, because, in her opinion, Ah Xing finally saves herself. It's all my fault. If it wasn't for my stupidity to tell the news that hasn't been investigated yet, maybe I wouldn't have gotten into the trap so easily. Being besieged by Mrs. Gao and the others, Ah Xing wouldn't have tried to save me. Quote. Quote. In fact, we are all deceived. Quote. The clues below are obviously sent to us deliberately by someone to let us go to the port, where they have already been ambushed. Matt was silent for a long time, and then said in a hoarse voice. In fact, in the incident at the port, he blamed himself more than Jessica. He invited Ah Xing to join the defender, but in the end he could only helpless. Let him die under the siege of the hand and Jin Bing's men. Thinking of this, Matt clenched his fist subconsciously, and the scar on his face burst out with bright red blood again because of emotional excitement. Axing is my friend. At this time, Luke Cage, who had been silent all the time, spoke up. With red eyes, he said word by word, he came to Harlem and changed whether he has changed or not. Street of Hope, he's Harlem and me, Dad, Mrs. Connie's hero, and I won't let him die in vain. For Axing. With that said, Luke Cage stretched out his fist. For Axing. After a silent glance, Jessica also stretched out her fist and touched Luke Cage's. For Axing. Matt stretched out his hand and said in a low and firm tone. The legend from Daredevil plus 1200. Fame plus 1000 from Jessica Jones. Fame from Luke Cage plus 1150. Lee ran. I clearly saw him fall. At the port, Bullseye looked at the empty ground in front of him, his tone full of doubts and incomprehension. Why is there nothing, whether it's blood or corpses? His eyes swept over everything around him, but he didn't find anything. On the other side, Madame Gao leaned on a cane and watched everything silently before saying, perhaps, because he is very special. Special. Hearing this, Bullseye turned his head subconsciously. You look like you know something. Recalling the first time he and Ah Xing met in their own production factory, when the other party claimed to be from Penglai, Mrs. Gao became more and more convinced of a certain conjecture in her heart. As a defector who stole the power of immortality from Kunlun, Madame Gao subconsciously linked the mysterious Penglai mentioned by Li Ran with the Kunlun in her impression. Invisibly, the danger level of Penglai in her heart was raised. Go back and tell Jin Bing that our operation failed this time. Next, there will be a tough battle for us, so that he can prepare in advance. I don't think they will pose a threat to Kim. Bullseye pouted, not paying attention. Believe me, I know very well how much power a person will explode in anger. What's more, the reason why this battle will take place today is not because they have threatened us. Bullseye. Famousness from Mrs. Gao plus 135. Li Ran. Boss, A. Golden Ratio Xiaomai. New York, in front of the Stark Industrial Building, there are many people in front of the conspicuous red food truck. Agent Phil lined up in the queue, dressed as a diner's, but his eyes naturally swept across the Stark Industrial Building in front of him. Looks like Tony Stark won't come to the company today. See today that Tony's private secretary Pepper Potts came to Stark Industries alone. Phil made a judgment in his heart, retracted his gaze, and put it back on the food truck in front of him. The aroma of burnt wheat that seemed to float from the tip of the nose made the agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. swallow subconsciously. In theory, as a professionally trained agent, you generally wouldn't be shaken by a little food unless it was delicious. Obviously, the food that this Chinese food truck sells is the kind of food that even a professional agent like Phil can't bear. Taking over the Xiaomai, Phil glanced at the owner of the dining car, who obviously had a story-like face in front of him. His professional habits from a special agent made him subconsciously speak, and he said in a familiar tone, "Boss, it seems that coming to New York soon." The action of rolling the dough with his hands subconsciously paused, and in the face of Phil's inquiry, Xielu appeared silent on the surface, and then said, "So what?" Xielu's reaction successfully aroused Phil's interest, and he couldn't help saying, "It's nothing, I just think that with your cooking skills, boss, since you can make such delicious dishes, it seems that the dining car should not be your first choice for work. The world of cooking is not as simple as you think." In this regard, Xielu did not respond positively, but lowered his head and whispered in a just right voice. "What?" Blinking, Phil couldn't help asking. "Hey man, however, before the shield agent could ask any further questions, the plump bald black man behind him couldn't help but complain, "You didn't see so many behind him? Are people waiting to line up, so hurry up and give up your seat." Turning his head, he glanced at the gradually dissatisfied team behind him, and Agent Phil had to give up his plan to ask further questions. After all, he still has a task to do, so he can't cause trouble casually. "Feel sorry." Leaving in front of the dining car, Phil turned his head and glanced at the burly man in the car. As a special agent, he had a hunch that there must be some kind of unknown secret hidden in the other party. Famousness from Phil Coulson +40. Of course there are secrets, and even if they aren't, I'll make you think they have. In the antique store, Lee Ran couldn't help muttering as he looked at the legend that popped up on the data panel. "Don't tell me you didn't wake up when you were awake." Meeting again after the battle at the port, even if in the eyes of the other party, he and Ah Xing are completely unrelated beings, but looking at Jessica who appeared in the antique store, Lee Ran's expression was a little subtle. Simply, the other party was drunk at the moment and did not notice the strangeness on Lee Ran's face. "I'd rather be drunk all the time." After gulping down the bottle in her hand, Jessica's mood was always low. "In this way, at least you won't think of those annoying things." "What's wrong?" As the party and protagonist of the port battle, Lee Ran naturally knew exactly what Jessica was talking about, but in order to avoid exposure, he still pretended to be ignorant and asked, "What happened?" Under the influence of alcohol, Jessica did not hide the content of the port battle, and directly revealed, "We fell into the trap of the Hand Union, and some people died because of it. We had no choice but to watch him fall. And all of this is because of me. Shit. I killed him. If I hadn't been so stupid and easily fell into the trap of the Hand Union, if he hadn't tried to save me at the time, maybe none of this would have happened." To this end, Jessica went to the guy who disclosed the information to him, and beat the other party hard. Basically, he didn't have 3 or 5 years of effort, and the other party couldn't get out of the hospital normally. But, so what? Ah Xing will not come back to life because of this. Famousness from Jessica Jones +110. Raised eyebrows and glanced at the legend on the panel. Lee Ran did not expect that his actions would actually make Jessica so sad. Looking at this petite figure pouring wine into the bottle, Lee Ran felt a bit of guilt in his heart. However, guilt is guilt, and Lee Ran will not expose his shortcomings and reveal the secret that he is a Xing because of the guilt in his heart. After restraining his emotions, Lee Ran continued to play his role as the third-party contact person of the Assassin Brotherhood. "Jessica, I am sorry for what you have suffered. However, I want to tell you that death is not the end of everything. In the eyes of the Assassin Brotherhood, death is the beginning of everything, representing hope and salvation. Faith. I think the one who saved you also has the same faith as the Brotherhood, and will fight side by side with you." Shared beliefs. Putting down the bottle in her hand, Jessica murmured and repeated. In the antique shop, as these words continued to sound, Jessica's originally confused expression became more and more sober. Grabbing her messy hair, she looked up at Lee Ran in front of her. "I hope, Assassin Brother will be able to help us fight together and defeat the Hand." Hearing this, Lee Ran raised his eyebrows subconsciously. Although Jessica's proposal was somewhat unexpected, for Lee Ran, it coincided with a sleepy encounter with a pillow, which was exactly what he wanted. Before, Lee Ran was thinking about how he should appear in front of the defenders after Ah Xing left the stage. Although there was a change in his heart, on the surface, Lee Ran still maintained his style as the contact person of the Assassin Brotherhood. "I've said it before, in the absence of a successful one-hit kill, the Brotherhood will not easily attack the opponents. Isn't your Brotherhood always doing the right thing by itself, killing one person to save thousands of people? So why don't you dare to shoot again? Maybe, all of this is just your excuse. The so-called Assassin Brotherhood is just a coward who shivered in the face of the mighty power of the Hand." Jessica's tone was very aggressive, and it was obvious that she wanted to provoke Lee Ran. Therefore, Lee Ran also cooperated with a thoughtful expression and nodded silently. "Got it, I'll pass your word on to the Brotherhood. But what the outcome will be, I can't make any guarantees. Anyway, thank you." The corners of her mouth twitched slightly, and Jessica thanked softly. In the afternoon, the line of people in front of the food truck gradually decreased. After selling out the last siamai, Xie Lu looked at the few scattered ingredients left, and turned his head to apologize to the customers who were still queuing in front of the food truck. "Sorry, the dim sum is sold out." "Oh no, please, I'm just starting to line up." "How could this happen? it's going to be my turn soon. Boss, is there really nothing I can do? I came from other places to eat dim sum. Although the remaining guests made regretful voices, Xielu still shook his head. The ingredients for cooking are gone. If you really want to taste dim sum, come back tomorrow. Gently persuaded a few customers who continued to line up to walk away, Xielu glanced at the stark industrial building behind him, then turned around and started to pack up the food truck. Although he looked like he was driving a food truck, he did the same thing. The thing about the food truck business, but he really didn't come to drive a food truck. The popularity is Li Ran's real purpose of arranging the avatar of Xielu to appear in Stark Industries. It's a pity that, unfortunately, Tony didn't show up at Stark Industries at all these days. Luckily, I'm not the only one messing around here. He raised his head and glanced at Agent Phil, who was hiding not far away. In the antique store, Li Ran felt a little comfort in his heart. You are selling in front of my building in the last few days, Happy, what is he selling? Just as Li Ran was manipulating his clone and was about to pack up the food truck and go back, a slightly frivolous sounded. Looking up, I saw Tony Stark, a frequent visitor to the major entertainment weekly magazines in New York, standing in front of the dining car, looking up and down at him. Dim sum, Tony. On the side, the driver Happy replied quickly. A little further away, Agent Phil noticed the figure appearing in front of the food truck, took a step forward subconsciously, and then stopped immediately, frowning in observation. Tony, how could he show up at Stark Industries at this time? By the way, dim sum. He raised his eyebrows and made a stunned look, and Tony turned his head towards Xielu in the food truck and said, bring me a dish that you are best at. Tony's appearance was somewhat unexpected to Li Ran. If he could, he would naturally be willing to do some cooking, take a look at Tony's reputation, and make it clear that the business would be profitable without loss. It's just that there are not many ingredients in the dining car. Second, there is a SHIELD agent staring in the distance. Li Ran didn't want to arouse the suspicion of Agent Phil because of some unusual actions of his own, so he had to leave it early. Throw away the card Jia Lu. Therefore, after hesitating again and again, Li Ran decided to continue to let the clone implement the character design of Xielu. Sorry, I've closed the stall. In the food truck, the clone shook his head and said directly to Tony. Close the stall. Tony blinked and glanced at the food trucks that were still busy, this time. The ingredients for making dim sum have been used up, so if you want to eat it, come to line up early tomorrow. After speaking, Li Ran turned around with Xielu, deliberately ignoring Tony's obviously unhappy expression, and continued to pack up the stuff in the food truck. Raising his eyebrows, Tony looked at the figure in front of him ignoring him, and said with a stinky face, perhaps you know who I am. Of course I know who you are, and I also know who you will become. In the antique store, listening to Tony's words, Li Ran couldn't help but secretly complain. Who are you? However, in the food truck, Xielu still maintained his personality as a pastry chef. To this, Tony certainly wouldn't give his name to answer. He turned his head and glanced at his driver. Happy said immediately, this is Mr. Tony Stark, New York's most famous businessman, philanthropist, genius scientist. And the public lover. I have always liked the nickname that the Playboy gave me. Raising his hand, he added, Tony pointed to the high-rise building behind the food truck, and said casually, this building behind you, the building is mine. So what? Tony originally thought that after hearing his exposed identity, the other party would be shocked. However, the reaction of the boss in the food truck was completely different from what he thought. I said that again, if you want to eat, please queue up tomorrow morning, thank you. After speaking, without waiting for Tony in front of him to respond, Xielu immediately walked out of the food truck and pulled down the side door. Fame from Tony Stark +40. Happy. In front of the Stark Industrial Building, Tony looked at the fast food truck that drove away, and said to his personal driver with a blank expression, tomorrow morning, I want to see that guy's food appear on my desk. And, you better pray that the food tastes as good as you say, or I'll let you wash all the cars in my garage. Famousness from Happy Hogan +25. You're late, Jessica. In the law firm, Luke Cage said something to Jessica who was late. Sitting in the chair, when he heard Jessica's voice, Matt suddenly turned his face and frowned. Sorry, Jessica apologized, scratching her messy long hair, I've been delayed because of something. Matt, there are people behind Jessica. Hearing Matt's reminder, Luke Cage suddenly changed his face, and stood up and lay at the door. Who is it? Is it a hand meeting? I don't know. Shaking his head, Matt held the guide stick in his hand. I only heard the movement of one person. Jessica looked at the somewhat violent reaction of the two, and raised her hand hesitantly. Well, you don't need to be so nervous, the person at the door was invited by me. You invited it. Jessica's words eased the originally tense atmosphere in the office, but Luke Cage still didn't appear too relaxed, but frowned and looked at Jessica. Jessica, you should know what we're going to do next. Of course I know. Nodding, Jessica turned her head and shouted at the door of the office, come in. As Jessica's voice fell, the door of Matt's law firm was opened. A man in a white robe walked in. The white hood covered most of his face, revealing only the slender curve of his chin. Glancing at everyone in the office, the man said in a deep voice. My name is Wesley Gibson, from the Brotherhood of Assassins. In midair, the flying bullet suddenly slid through a magical arc, hitting the head of the opposite hand ninja at an incredible angle. Looking at the handicapped ninja who fell in front of him, Luke Cage raised his eyebrows. Even if it is not the first time to see Wesley's ability, Luke Cage still feels very incredible every time he sees it. After all, the ability to turn a bullet is really a bit too magical. Obviously, he forgot that the ability to be invulnerable, in a sense, was just as magical. Bang! Dodging the flying side hook, he lifted the heavy object in his hand and threw it to the place where the hand-joined ninja gathered. With the successive battles, Jessica has also found her most suitable fighting style. The two abilities of flying and super strength make her more and more handy in the battle with the hand. Careful, Bullseye's attack is coming. Raising his hand and using the guide stick to block the slash in front of him, Matt turned his face and noticed the untraceable sound of breaking in midair, and then reminded the remaining three. Hearing Matt's reminder, Jessica's expression couldn't help but change, but then she forced herself to calm down and continue fighting with the remaining hand ninjas. She hadn't forgotten the battle in the port, and even if she could, Jessica wanted to take revenge on the weird guy in the black tights in front of her. However, just like his weird appearance, this guy called Bullseye is extremely difficult to deal with, especially his magical throwing ability. Although he is not able to turn bullets at will like Wesley, he is still defending them, great hindrance to actions. Leave it to me to deal with him. Wesley opened his mouth and turned his gun to the black figure standing not far away. Noticing the muzzle of Wesley's turn, Bullseye's expression suddenly became solemn. He turned sideways to hide his body as much as possible, and at the same time changed the playing cards in his hand and picked up the pistol. Although Bullseye has an amazing throwing ability, he is still wary of Wesley's magical arc ballistics. In the previous battle, if he hadn't been sharp enough to avoid the turning bullets, maybe it doesn't appear here in its full appearance as it is now. Thinking in his heart, there was no hesitation in the action of Bullseye's hand. In the face of Wesley's threat, he acted decisively and shot first. His throwing ability is not only for playing cards, but also for conventional weapons. Facing Bullseye's firepower, Wesley didn't seem to worry at all. First, he is just a clone like Ah Shing. Even if he is really hit by a bullet, he can't follow the chakra to hurt Li Ran, who is far away in the antique store. Second, he has the ability of adrenal acceleration as a trump card. Makes Wesley not too easily attacked by Bullseye. Sideways to avoid the flying bullets, Bullseye's throwing ability is amazing, but this kind of straight attack is obviously not as difficult to avoid as arc ballistics. Wesley fired another round of bullets at his fingertips. Under Superman's dynamic vision, Bullseye could easily see the bullet that came out from Wesley's muzzle, but his expression was not very happy. Instead, it became more and more like an enemy. Raising his hand, aiming at the flying bullet, Bullseye's hand screeched wildly, intending to use this to block the flying bullet in front of him. In the eyes of ordinary people, using shooting to block flying bullets is obviously a bit of a fantasy. However, in the Bullseye hand, the super throwing ability combined with the dynamic vision far beyond ordinary people makes everything possible. Boom! With a not-so-crisp crash, Wesley's bullet changed direction and lost the ability to turn. Success! Seeing this scene, the target's eyes subconsciously raised the corners of his mouth. However, before the smile on his face bloomed, more bullets flew in front of him. Seeing this scene, Bullseye's pupils shrank suddenly, and the originally calm mood suddenly fluctuated. No one has stipulated that arc ballistics can only be fired one shot at a time. In the face of the threat of multiple turning bullets, even the bullseye who is extremely conceited about his own ability has to put away what has just risen in his heart. Self-satisfied, he shrank his head and tried his best to avoid these flurry of bullets. With Wesley's restraint, the most powerful killer of Jin and his men could not have much influence on the remaining defenders. After several entanglements, Luke Cage resisted forcibly because of his invulnerability. In front of him, the hand-joined ninjas and most of the attacks of Jin and his men created an excellent opportunity for Matt to burn most of the goods in this stronghold. This is the first time, Mrs. Gao. Obviously, things didn't go as smoothly as you said before. Once again, getting a failed reply from Bullseye's mouth, Jin Ping stared at the thin figure of Mrs. Gao in front of him, and said coldly. Several consecutive battles with the defenders have caused his subordinates to suffer a lot of casualties, especially the results of the last two battles. Even for Jin Ning, it is a big loss, not only in money, and his dominance over Hell's Kitchen has gradually been questioned. It's not just your loss, Jin Bing, they found a weird helper from somewhere, who can control the trajectory of bullets. Many of my ninjas died under these bullets. I asked you to come here, and I don't want to hear your excuses, Mrs. Gao. Standing up, Jin Bian leaned on his cane and came to Mrs. Gao, looking down at the skinny old man. If you can't give me a satisfactory result, then I think it's time to think about whether it needs to end. Our previous partnership is over. If in the past, Mrs. Gao was not too afraid of the threat of Jin Bing, but as the power to maintain immortality in her body faded, Mrs. Gao seemed to have lost her calmness in the past, and the actions of the defenders brought great importance to their plan of the Hand Association. At this critical moment, she could not lose Jin Bing's power. Wrinkling her wrinkled face and thinking hard, for some reason, Mrs. Gao's mind suddenly came to the scene of her meeting with a Xing. Maybe, we also need to find a helper. Help, Mrs. Gao's words made Jin bow his head involuntarily. I saw a faint smile on the other's thin face. Yes, an absolutely powerful helper. Although it successfully eliminated another stronghold of the Hand, destroying their criminal operations. But the defenders weren't entirely unscathed. Especially on Matt's body, although the super senses allowed him to successfully evade most of the attacks of the Hand Ninja, there were still not a few attacks that left scars on his body. Maybe you need a break, Matt. After dealing with Daredevil's wounds, Claire said involuntarily. With the formation of the defenders, the nurse joined the team in her own way. You've been injured too often. If it goes on like this, I'm worried your body won't be able to take it. Although dressed as a superhero, Matt is essentially just an ordinary person with super senses, neither the invulnerable body of Luke Cage nor flying in the air like Jessica, or Wesley's magical trick to change bullet trajectory like that. All he has is his own fighting skills, and his will to never compromise in the face of criminals. Indeed, Jessica nodded while clutching her bandaged arm. Although he also suffered a little damage in the battle, it was obvious that Matt was the most seriously injured by several of them. You need more rest, Matt. The Hand and Kim may not give us time to rest. Facing Claire and Jessica's persuasion, Matt did not appreciate it. I have a hunch that if they continue like this, something terrible will happen. But if you hold on like this again, maybe in the next battle with the Hand, the person who falls will be you. Luke Cage opened his mouth and looked directly at Matt in front of him. We have already losing Ah Xing. I don't want to see anything happen to you again. The defenders can't lose anyone anymore. Quote. Luke Cage's words made Matt fall into silence. Turning his arms, Matt felt his physical condition. Just as Luke Cage said, with his current physical condition, there is simply no way to withstand another too fierce battle. Actually, it's not just you, we need to rest Matt too. Luke Cage has been paying attention to Matt's expression, aware of the loose look on his face, and then said, since this time, we have been fighting with Hand and Jin Bing's men over and over again, and the battle has come down. Everyone has more or less reached their limit, and last time, Jessica was almost injured by the bullseye because she was too tired. It was just a momentary mistake. Jessica pouted and defended aloud. Wesley, fatal error. Jessica, if you don't speak, no one will treat you as dumb. Jessica was still arguing there, but Matt had apparently been persuaded by Luke Cage. He stood up with his guide stick and faced the defenders in front of him. Luke is right, I was too impatient. We have destroyed many strongholds of the Hand Association during this period of time, but at the same time, we have also suffered a lot of attacks. The next battle will only be more sinister and needs to be repaired for a short period of time. Prepare for battle. Woo. After coming out of Claire's apartment, Luke Cage turned his head and carefully observed the surrounding situation. The defenders are temporarily disbanded because of Matt's injury, and he wants Harlem to take a look. Looks like you've had a good time with my Jessica all this time. Just then, a low and hoarse voice came from behind Luke Cage. Luke Cage turned his head and saw a man wearing a purple tie walking towards him. Famous from Tony Stark +55. In an antique store, Lee Ran looked at the legend that popped up on the data panel, and felt more and more how correct his decision to let Xie Lu go to Stark Industries to sell snacks. After all, not everyone can get him a lot of fame with such ease as Tony. Wesley's side and the members of the Defender worked tirelessly to settle one hand after another stronghold, and the fame gained was only a little more than Tony's here. The point is, Tony Stark is not in any danger here, at least until he becomes Iron Man. It is definitely a safe target for Legend. So, have you thought about it? Eating the sumai in his hand while it was still hot, Tony raised his eyebrows as he watched Xie Lu in the food truck, and reconfirmed, as long as you nod your head, you will be Tony Stark's personal chef from now on. I believe I will definitely be more comfortable than you are hiding in this red fast food truck. I'm not interested in being your personal chef. While holding the dough together, Xie Lu shook his head and refused the invitation from Tony. Just kidding. Although Lee Ran wanted Tony's reputation, he never planned to run to the Playboy's side to be a cook, not even a clone. What's more, Xie Lu, as a chakra clone, even with the reinforcement of system cards, can't achieve the level of existence for 24 hours. I understand. Nodding, Tony didn't give up. You were worried about money. 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, you can raise as much as you want, of course, within a reasonable range. Quote. Look at this ugly face of capitalism. In the antique store, Lee Ran pouted when he heard Tony's words. It has to be said that it is indeed difficult for people to have a good impression of Tony Stark in this period. Stopping the movement in his hand, Xie Lu looked up at Tony in front of him, and replied in a deep voice, Mr. Tony Stark, maybe you were really rich, but there are many things in this world, and it's not just about money. What can be measured is that I do not cook for money. Cooking is something that brings happiness to people, not just food for one person. If possible, I hope to ask you to move out of the way now, and other guests will come to eat my dishes in the future. Is cooking something that brings people happiness? Famousness from Tony Stark +70. Looking at Tony, who was in deep thought, the avatar in the food truck still looked calm on the surface. In the antique shop, Lee Ran, the main body, couldn't stop the smile on the corner of his mouth. Sure enough, the wisdom of the old ancestors should not be underestimated. After his hard-to-find operation, he was afraid that Tony would not obediently submit to the legend. Chapter 71. Legend. 7520. In the antique store, Lee Ran looked at the content displayed on the data panel with flickering eyes. The 10,000 legend required to redeem the bronze treasure chest was still less than 2,500, and Lee Ran felt that he had to work harder. When you have enough fame, you will exchange the C-level character cards as soon as possible. Hope it's not too bad luck. Lee Ran was both anticipating and a little nervous about the second C-level card that was about to be handed. The first C-level card Shui M synthesized from the system fragments, although it cannot be said to be too bad, even the skill 3 body technique it possesses can be said to constitute the core help for Lee Ran to quickly accumulate a large amount of fame. But 1 yard is 1 yard. As the first C-ranked character card in hand, Shui Mu is indeed not as good as Lee Ran expected. Simply put, it's just too weak. Not to mention that the frontal combat power is not strong. The only trump card is Broken Curse Seal, a ghost ability that has great side effects and affects the appearance. You deserve it. You don't survive a few episodes, whether in anime or inanimate. He secretly complained in his heart, and Lee Ran couldn't help but pray that in the future, the results of the bronze treasure chest would never come out like Shui Mu again. A few days later, Lee Ran, who was on the streets of New York to talk about Tony's legend through Xie Lu, got news from Jessica. Matt decided to restructure the defenders. Although, he was surprised that Matt's injury was healed faster than he thought, but in the face of this opportunity to gain popularity, he naturally couldn't refuse, so he nodded and agreed without hesitation. Wesley, who disappeared for a few days, reappears. Why did you suddenly choose to gather in such a place? Following the notification on Luke Cage's phone, Jessica and Wesley came to a somewhat remote abandoned warehouse in Hell's Kitchen. Jessica frowned. looking at the messy environment overgrown with weeds and rubbish in the warehouse, and couldn't help complaining. It felt as if we were doing something elusive. It's just for concealment, Luke Cage explained in a deep voice. Since this time, our opponents and the forces under Jin Bing have caused a lot of losses, and I'm worried that they will be desperate. We chose this kind of place because we wanted to take revenge on those around us. We were too careless in Claire before, but fortunately, there was no danger. Jessica looked up at Luke Cage on the opposite side, and seeing that his expression was as usual, she withdrew her gaze and pouted. Anyway, I don't really want this place. Luke Cage smiled slightly and said, it's just a temporary base. Matt should be here soon. While talking about Luke Cage turning around, he looked at his clone and nodded subconsciously and smiled. Not right. In the antique store, Lee Ran couldn't help frowning looking at Luke Cage's appearance. He always felt that there was something strange about Luke Cage he saw today, but he couldn't tell where it was. Just keep watching. Because there is no too direct evidence, Lee Ran is not good at acting rashly, so he can only raise his vigilance a little, and at the same time let the clone in the warehouse keep his original taciturn appearance. After a few minutes, with the sound of crisp footsteps, Matt, dressed as a lawyer, came to the warehouse. He was holding a cane for the blind, and he still felt a little jerky while walking. Obviously, the injury on his body had not fully recovered. Really, seeing this scene, Lee Ran became more and more convinced of his previous judgment. Luke, what's the matter with you calling me here? In the warehouse, Matt stopped and asked Luke Cage in front of him. Calling you here. Jessica noticed what Matt said, her expression froze, and she said, but, he called and told me that you called us here. Saying that, Jessica frowned and turned to look at the tall figure in front of her. What is all this about? In the face of Jessica's questioning and Matt's doubts, Luke Cage's expression still did not change at all, and continued to maintain his usual low voice and replied, yes, I called you, so does Matt. Luke Cage's strange appearance made Matt frown. His keen senses made him feel that the whole thing was not right. He was about to say something, but he felt his consciousness suddenly appear. A sense of ambiguity. As for the reason, with the words of Luke Cage fell. A clear sound of footsteps began to sound in the warehouse. Kilgrave in a purple suit appeared in the warehouse. He looked at Jessica in front of him and said with a smile, of course it's because I miss you again, Jessica. Kilgrave. Seeing Kilgrave appearing in the warehouse, Jessica's expression suddenly changed and she said in shock. He didn't expect that the other party would find him at this time. Purple Man. In the antique store, Lee Ran's expression froze when he saw the scene in the warehouse. Noticing the change on Jessica's face, a calm smile appeared on Kilgrave's face. Stepping forward to Jessica, Luke Cage cooperated and retreated behind him. Obviously, at some point, Kilgrave has controlled Luke Cage himself through his own abilities. I always thought, Jessica, you are a special existence like me. Glancing at everyone in the warehouse, Kilgrave said to himself in his usual conceited tone, but obviously, I was wrong, the world is a lot more interesting than I thought, such as your friends, I am very surprised by the ability they show. With that said, Kilgrave looked back at Luke Cage, who was standing behind him, even I can't help but envy the invulnerable body. And the one next to you, who obviously can't see anything, but is able to fight with his own feelings. I also heard that one of you can beat people with his feet before. What are you trying to do, Kilgore? Leaf. Interrupting Kilgrave's words, Jessica gritted her teeth and resisted the erosion from the purple man's ability, and asked with difficulty. Looking at Jessica, who was struggling more and more under his ability, Kilgrave raised his eyebrows and replied casually, I haven't thought about the specifics, but it must be quite interesting, such as going to take a stroll in a certain antique store and say hello to the boss there. After all, I have received a lot of attention from him before. Saying that, Kilgrave covered his arm and pointed it out. The owner of the antique shop in his mouth should be talking about me, right? In the antique store, Lee Ran couldn't help blinking after hearing Kilgrave's words. In the warehouse, Kilgrave was still narrating to himself, perhaps because of his ability, he seemed to enjoy the feeling of mastering everything. Don't you? You're not afraid of it, and then, go to be shot by the opposite party, will it be solved? Jessica pulled the corners of her stiff mouth with difficulty, showing a mocking expression. Hearing this, Kilgrave's expression suddenly darkened. The encounter at the antique store was the closest he had ever been to death, and Kilgrave still remembers the scene from time to time. He felt the wound on his arm, which had long since healed, aching. Perhaps I'm being too kind, Jessica, and you've forgotten who I am. With a smile on his face, Kilgrave moved step by step toward him, and his body stiffened under his power. Jessica, who couldn't move, I miss the days before, when you never complained to me and were always obedient. Stopping his steps, Kilgrave looked at Jessica, who was close at hand, and noticed the desperate and stubborn look in her eyes, and the smile that was restrained at the corners of her mouth bloomed again. Yes, it's this look, this look. That's why I've always liked you, Jessica, you really are different. As Kilgrave spoke, he reached out his hand and touched Jessica's face. However, just at this moment, a crisp sound of breaking the air sounded. What? Kilgrave turned his head in surprise and saw a blind cane attacking him. Raising his hand to block the attacking stick, Kilgrave covered his burning wound and looked at Matt, who still maintained the ability to act independently. How is it possible that you can still continue to act? This is the second time I have encountered an existence that can resist my ability. Repelling Kilgrave, Matt leaned on a guide cane and said to Jessica with difficulty, Jessica, hurry up now, I can't support it for a long time. The injury on his body could not be he hasn't recovered yet, and now he is forcibly getting rid of Kilgrave's control to fight. Matt can feel it, and he can't hold on for much time. If I can, I want to go too, but it's a pity. Jessica shook her head with difficulty and replied with a wry smile. So, you'd better go by yourself, Matt, while you can still move. Unfortunately, I don't think either of you can go, Kilgrave said coldly, clutching his arm injured by Matt's attack, then turned to Luke, who had been standing quietly behind him. Cage ordered, give me a punch and punch of that blind man into meat sauce. Nodding, Luke Cage walked towards Matt in front of him with an indifferent expression. Why do they always feel that they seem to have forgotten that there is another person in the warehouse? Looking at the people fighting in front of them, Lee Rand's expression was a little weird in the antique shop. Perhaps, Wesley's performance was too silent from the beginning, causing both Kilgrave and Jessica to subconsciously think that Wesley was under control. Although, there is no doubt that it looks like a real person on the surface. But in fact, Wesley, as the clone formed by Lee Rand Chakra and the system card, is simply not within the scope of Kilgrave's ability to control the influence. After all, no matter which edition, comics or TV series are introduced in, the Purple Man's abilities only have an effect on human beings. Looking at Matt, who was struggling to avoid Luke Cage's attack, Kilgrave's originally gloomy expression couldn't help but ease a little. But obviously, the result of such a battle could not satisfy the distorted guy in his heart. He raised his head and set his eyes on the white figure who had been standing motionless since just now. Curving the corners of his mouth, he commanded as a matter of course, now, shoot and break his feet. Nodding, Wesley drew his weapon. No, Matt. The body was fixed in place, and Jessica could only anxiously shout to Matt, who had been gradually forced into the corner by Luke Cage during the battle. Boom. Inside the antique shop, Lee Rand manipulated Wesley. With the sound of a loud gunshot, Luke Cage, who had been attacking Matt in the warehouse, stopped what he was doing with a look of confusion on his face. Kilgrave stood there, still with a look of disbelief on his face, his eyes fixed on the muzzle in Wesley's hands. On his forehead, a clear bullet mark appeared there. Fame from Kilgrave plus 2000. Fame from Jessica plus 1500. Without Kilgrave's maintenance, everyone in the warehouse quickly recovered from the previous state of control. What's wrong with me? What happened? Luke Cage shook his head and looked at the somewhat unfamiliar environment in front of him. His last memory was only the moment he came out of Claire's apartment a few days ago. You were attacked and controlled. Matt was leaning on a guide cane, panting as he did it. Control? Who is it? I remember, the guy with the purple tie. The last memory in my memory seems to be him appearing in front of me. Covering his chaotic brain, Luke Cage gradually sorted out his thoughts. He looked up at Matt, who was a little embarrassed in front of him, and couldn't help asking, where's that guy, where he is now? If you mean the guy controlling you, he's lying there. Matt pointed to Kilgrave's body and replied, Wesley has done it for you. Famousness from Luke Cage plus 100. Break free from the motionless appearance. Jessica stumbled to her feet. Jessica looked at Kilgrave, who was shot in the head by Wesley, with a complex expression of shock mixed with relief on her face. She glanced down at the corpse, and then at Wesley, who was silently putting away his pistol on the other side. Why, can you? He can't control me. Naturally, Li Ran couldn't tell Jessica the specific reason. However, he didn't need to tell the truth and answered vaguely, leaving the rest to Jessica's guess. Could it be the Assassin Brotherhood? Sure enough, after hearing Wesley's reply, Jessica naturally linked it to the Assassin Brotherhood. Before, Li Ran in the antique store was not controlled by Kilgrave's ability, and Wesley, as an assassin of the Assassin Brotherhood, of course also had such ability. Thinking of this, Jessica began to feel extremely fortunate that she had asked Li Ran to contact the Assassin Brotherhood. If, and not for, this is the case, perhaps it would be a different picture now in the warehouse. At least, I shot him in the head as you said before. Warehouse, with the death of Kilgrave, the crisis faced by several of the defenders is lifted. In the antique shop, Li Ran silently retracted his gaze and focused his attention on the data panel of the system in front of him. Legend 11,185. The accumulation of fame is faster than Li Ran thought. Especially the wave of fame brought by Zirin after he was finally killed in the warehouse, it can be said that Li Ran has achieved the greatest amount of fame since he gained it. Sure enough, there is a great terror between life and death, a great influence, and a lot of legends of the harvest. Of course, the practice of killing the Zirin is obviously a one-shot deal, and the practice of repeatedly impressing and gaining fame through Phantom Thief Kid, which is good or bad, Li Ran can't make it for a while judge. Either way, it's a good thing to have a legend. Thinking of this, Li Ran shook his head and stopped worrying about the way to obtain fame. Because, compared to these, there are obviously more important things waiting for him. The fact that the legend reached 10,000 means that the bronze treasure chest that he had been looking forward to before was beckoning to him. Exchange. Without the slightest hesitation, Li Ran spent 10,000 legend degrees to exchange a brand new bronze treasure chest from the system. I don't know if it was because of his harder price, but Li Ran always felt that the bronze treasure chest in front of him looked taller and taller than the black iron treasure chest he had opened in the past. After all, the value of 10,000 legends is there. Taking a deep breath and suppressing his excitement, Li Ran clicked on the treasure chest that radiated bronze metallic luster throughout the system. Open. Following the familiar white light, the items in the bronze treasure chest appeared in front of Li Ran's eyes. Prop. Jetwind Shell. Effect. Impact. Introduction. The special props from the Sky Island in the world of One Piece, the extinct shellfish, are very precious and are often used in small boats and waiba. Prop. Divine Power Talisman D with dim spiritual power. Effect. Assist. Introduction. Stick it on any part of the body to increase its own strength by 10%. Lasts for half an hour and disappears after use. Note. A novice craftsman made semi-finished products due to lack of strength. Note 2. I feel that my body is full of power. Note 3. Any part. The items opened in the bronze treasure chest are more than Li Ran thought, especially the two items, the bronze treasure and the divine power talisman, which are obviously different from the black iron treasure chest opened before. It is an item that can help you in battle. Silently taking his eyes away from the system's Note 3, Li Ran immediately cast it on the card drawn from the treasure chest. Although it was not the first time that he had drawn a C-rank bronze card, Li Ran's heart was still subconsciously tense. However, the characters that appeared on the card made Li Ran's face show a subtle look. He wondered if the system was secretly cooperating with his plan to open the box, or if he had successfully left Africa and joined the European Union. Because he has evidence in his hand. C-class card, Ancient Sword Soul, Fire Cloud Cthulhu. Skill, Tathagata Palm, 9 forms. Background introduction. The characters in The Palm of the Tathagata are about 46 or 7 years old. They do things their own way, and often do not follow the rules of the card. They are arrogant, so they have the title of evil gods. Buddha's Palm. Become the public enemy of contemporary martial arts. Remarks. The first form of the Tathagata Palm. Well, although the Huiyan evil god that appeared in the card is not the same person as the ultimate murderer Huiyan evil god that Li Ran had previously mentioned through Ah Shing. However, no matter what, this C-rank card was much better than what he had expected before. Li Ran even guessed that this Fire Cloud Cthulhu, called the Ancient Sword Soul Edition, should be regarded as the existence of the peak force value in the system's C-level card arrangement. After all, Tathagata's Palm is so famous, whether in movies, TV shows or comics, it is one of the top peerless martial arts. Tathagata Palm, Fire Cloud Evil God. In the antique store, Li Ran looked at the two introductions on the character card, and a vague idea gradually formed in his mind. Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen. Danny, who has returned from Cambodia, is looking for clues to start a union. However, it is clear that with the actions of the defenders during this period, the activities of the Hand Society have become more and more secretive, making it difficult for Danny to find any clues that are too useful for a while. I really don't know where the hand meeting you are talking about is. I have been in contact with some strangely dressed people before, but they haven't appeared for a long time. Are you sure you've said everything you know? If I find out that one of your words is lying to me. When it comes to interrogation, Danny doesn't look like he's good at it, but he clearly has his own method. Raised his fist, golden light flashed on it. Looking at Danny's glowing fist, the interrogator swallowed his saliva subconsciously. He didn't forget the scene where the other party just pierced a wall with his fist. He raised his hand and said, "Well, I admit, I saw them once recently, and saw where these guys were on Jinbian's territory." Golden. He let go and threw the man in his tight hands. Danny frowned and muttered the name to himself. Seeing Danny's contemplative appearance, the white man being interrogated hurriedly fled from the scene, and even nearly hit a pedestrian walking by. Turned sideways, avoiding the rampaging whites. The Asian man in the tang suit turned his head and glanced at the direction the other party was fleeing, shook his head helplessly, then turned around and continued to walk in the direction he was going. The place from which it escaped. "Little brother, may I ask?" On the spot, the pensive Danny felt that his shoulder was gently tapped, and he didn't have time to think. After many years of martial arts training in Kunlun, his body subconsciously counterattacked, raising his elbow and suddenly moving towards the voice. "Go in the direction you came." Oops. Halfway through the elbow, Danny remembered that he was now in New York, not in Kunlun. He looked at the Asian man standing behind him, trying hard to recover the power in his hands, but it was obviously too late. However, the expected screams did not come. In the face of Danny's menacing blow, the Asian man deftly sideways avoided the elbow, and then quickly kicked Danny's defenseless knee, causing him to fall to the ground. Cough. In the face of the man's unexpected and fierce counterattack, Danny did not check for a while, and fell heavily to the ground with an uncomfortable expression on his face. "Boy, are you all right?" Looking at Danny lying on the ground, the Asian man asked with a calm expression. "It's all right." Struggling to stand up from the ground, Danny rubbed his aching chest while holding back. It's okay, come back." Hearing this, the man immediately made a gesture, with one hand in front and the other slightly bent, and said to Danny. Looking at the posture of the man, Danny subconsciously frowned. In fact, given the current situation, the two have no reason to continue fighting. However, Danny was not in a good mood when he was thrown a big somersault. He raised his fists in a signature kung fu pose. "Be careful." Immediately after, Danny reminded him, he stepped forward with his front legs, waved his fist, and attacked the Asian man on the opposite side. Facing Danny's swift attack, the man's expression showed no signs of panic. I saw that he was dodging sideways to avoid the swiping fist, and then he grabbed Danny's wrist with an unwilling shot, followed the trend with a sharp side kick on his feet, and then threw Danny who was attacking him. Bang! With a dull crashing sound, Danny fell to the ground with a confused expression on his face. "Do you want to fight again?" On the opposite side, there is still a man's tepid voice. Continue. The repeated defeats made Danny a bit of a real fire, and he got up from the ground again. He looked at the Asian man in tang suit raising his fists and exuding golden light. "This time, I want to all out." Noticing Danny's glowing hands, the Asian man subconsciously twitched his eyebrows, showing a somewhat surprised look, but still kept his usual calm tone and replied, "You can give it a try." Waving the power of his iron fist, Danny charged towards the man confidently. However, the slap in the face is like a tornado, fast and violent. Facing a powerful blow full of iron fist power, the man didn't give him a chance to hit him at all. I saw him retreating lightly, avoiding the iron fist's attack line, and then bent over and raised his hand to grab Danny's trousers. Pulling up, with a familiar landing sound, the legendary iron fist that came out of Kunlun once again came into intimate contact with the ground. Bowing his head and looking at Danny who fell to the ground, the man continued to say, "It's useless if the bottom is unstable, and no matter how powerful your fist is, if you can't hit anyone." Hearing this, Danny got up from the ground with a silent expression on his face. He looked at his embarrassed appearance, and after a while, he asked, "Who are you?" In response, the man smiled slightly, and immediately replied, Peng Lai, Yi Wen. Famousness from Tekken Danny Rand plus 50. Famousness from Tekken Danny Rand plus 70. Famousness from Tekken Danny Rand plus 10. Famousness from Tekken Danny Rand plus 175. It's finally connected. In the antique shop, Li Ran could not help but breathe a sigh of relief while controlling Yi Wen to tell Iron Fist where he came from. In order to make Ip Man appear on the stage smoothly, Li Ran also worked hard. Initially, he planned to let Ip Man appear directly in front of Matt and the others, and complete the appearance simply and rudely. However, after thinking about it again, I felt that such an appearance lacked a little shock. Coincidentally, I recently learned from the Black Boy Wells that a curly-haired white man appeared in Hell's Kitchen waving a pair of glowing fists, and asked about the news of the hand. However, the scene just now appeared. Successfully made Ip Man and Iron Fist converge. While Li Ran was secretly relieved, he involuntarily looked at a progress bar on the system. This progress bar is the upgrade information that popped up from the data panel of the system after he opened the C-level card Fire Cloud Evil God. The reason for the upgrade is not complicated, because Li Ran holds more than 10 cards. Although the system upgrade process did not affect Li Ran's use of cards, but looking at the progress bar on the data panel that moved little by little every day, Li Ran still felt a lot of pressure. Fortunately, with the countdown of time, the upgrade of the system is gradually approaching the end. Looking at the end of the last progress bar at the top of the system, a message indicating that the upgrade is complete pops up. Li Ran couldn't help blinking and reopened the system's data panel. However, the picture in front of him was not much different from what he had seen in the past. What is this? What about system upgrades? Did it fail? No, the prompt clearly says it was successful. Reluctantly, he searched the data panel for a while, and Li Ran finally found out the part that changed after this upgrade from the system. This time, there are 2 new functions in the system upgrade. The first is to add a new card slot. This is undoubtedly a great event for Li Ran. In the past, due to the limitation of the card slot, he needed to temporarily change the card every time he used it. Although under normal circumstances, such a replacement will not have much impact on Li Ran, but what danger will he encounter after the repair is not complete, such as the one against the Zirin? If it is not for his luck, Wesley's ability is just right to resist the ability of the opponent's control, and the consequences may be unimaginable. Especially with the appearance of the card Mizuki. 3-body technique is the most core part of his current plan. Although he successfully helped Li Ranpu launch his long-term plan, it also forced him to keep the Shui Mu card on his body, more or less. Some limits Li Ran's plans. In particular, with more and more characters appearing on the scene, in many cases, 2 clones alone cannot support Li Ran's next plan. And he himself, because of the limitation of the card Shui Mu, could not get off the field in person and participate in the battle to share the role. Because of such a situation of suffering, Li Ran has already started to think about letting Wesley retire when necessary, so as to free up a clone to play the role of Fire Cloud Evil God. And all of this, with the emergence of the new card slot, undoubtedly provides essential flexibility for Li Ran's next plan. The addition of the card slot function certainly made Li Ran happy. However, all of this is not as good as another function added by the system, fusion. To be precise, it should be the card fusion function. Different from the previous synthesis, the new fusion function of the system is obviously more targeted, and it is clear that the new function is unlocked for the increasing number of cards in Li Ran's hands. I can't see it, the system is quite humanized. After whispering something, Li Ran immediately turned his attention back to the fusion function of the data panel. Unlike synthesis, the functionality of fusion is not free. Just put 2 unused cards into it, and the system immediately gave a prompt. Yes, no. Consumes 100 points of fame to fuse the E-rank card Anxi Koji and E-rank card Nohara Hirohit. 100 fame is not much, at least for the current Li Ran. Just let Xielu get the amount that Tony can get when he goes to Stark Industries to smash Tony once. Therefore, he didn't see much hesitation, so he made a decision to combine one and try it out. In case, open a high-level card. I have to say that the unboxing of Hui and Evil God made Li Ran a little bloated. After consuming 100 legends, a brand new card in the system appeared in front of him. However, upon seeing the card for the first time, Li Ran's heart, which he had been expecting, was instantly chilled. The wooden texture on the card clearly told him the content of the fusion. E-class card, King 5/5. Skill: Emperor Engine, Play Electric. Background introduction. The hero is ranked 7th in the S class, and he is 29 years old. His real name is unknown. Known as the strongest man on Earth. The appearance is often accompanied by a background sound of choo choo choo. It is said that it is the unique sound of the Emperor Engine, starting when it enters a combat state. But in fact, he is just an ordinary person who likes action games and love games and stays at home every day. The so-called Imperial Engine is caused by the excessively loud heartbeat when the heartbeat is too fast due to its excessive tension. Note: sudden, 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 sudden. The consumption of 100 legendary degrees and 2 cards combined to form such a character, and Li Ran's originally high emotions fell back to the previous state in an instant. Sure enough, people still can't be too inflated. No, as soon as they are inflated, the lesson will come. Shaking his head and restraining his complicated feelings, Li Ran silently looked at the newly merged card in front of him. Although the results of the new features were not as good as expected, they at least gave Li Ran some basic information. For example, the fused cards are not used infinitely like the character cards opened in the treasure chest, and the number of uses is displayed after the name of the card. When he thought that this kind of card with this limited number of times was actually created by himself using 2 cards in a row, Li Ran suddenly felt that blood began to drip in his heart. This wave is almost blood loss. I can also draw E-level cards out of the box, and there is no limit to the number of times they can be used. The start was unfavorable, although the result of the first fusion hit Li Ran's morale a little. However, looking at the sparkling fusion words on the system, Li Ran was still eager to try and couldn't control himself. Just once, I'll try again, and if it doesn't work, I'll give up. With his mouth standing, Li Ran immediately took out 2 more cards and placed them in the fusion position of the system. Looking at the 2 cards in the fusion column, Li Ran hesitated for a while, and then put another card on it. Yes, no, consumes 100 points of fame to fuse the E-level card Baby and the C-level card D-level card, 5th Senior Brother Axing. Sure, Class B card, Turtle Immortal 1/1. Skill: Turtle Immortal Flow. Background introduction. On the surface, it is an old man with a color Mimi. But in fact, he is a warrior who dares to sacrifice his life to destroy evil. The Turtle Immortals on Earth can be regarded as all-powerful figures. Although it is said that the Turtle Fairy has lost its reputation as the number 1 in the world in the later period, the title of God of Martial Arts is still circulating. Note: little girl, let me take a look at your Li Ran. Are you sure it's here? Late at night, New York, in front of a heavily guarded old building on the outskirts of the city. Bullseye frowned and turned to ask the men beside him. That's right, we've searched all over New York and only this place has the same name as the old guy said. The so-called Willard is actually a mental hospital. He raised his head, glanced at the dilapidated sign at the entrance gate, and couldn't help muttering. If his subordinates found out by accident, he would never have imagined that the person he had been searching for was actually in a mental hospital. It's just that there really exists the so-called ultimate murderer, the evil god of Fire Cloud. With this somewhat convoluted name in mind, Bullseye was full of doubts. If the other party is really so powerful, how can they be put in a mental hospital? Although there are many doubts in my heart, since I finally got a clue, Bullseye doesn't want to let it go. Although the high wall built by the Willard Mental Hospital can block most of the patients in the hospital, it obviously cannot hinder the Bullseye. I saw him and he gently jumped and climbed together. The next second people have appeared in mental hospitals. He avoided the guards in the hospital with ease, and with the ID card obtained from a doctor's office, Bullseye easily broke into the hospital. The mental hospital in the middle of the night was not quiet, and all kinds of weird sounds added a little weirdness to it. However, as the most effective killer under Jin Bing, Bullseye ignored these strange movements and searched for the place where the Fire Cloud evil god might exist. Do not have it. However, after a round of searching, apart from mental patients of different appearances, he did not find any figures in the mental hospital that might be the so-called Huiyan evil god. Sure enough, it was a mistake. Shaking his head, just as Bullseye was about to evacuate from the hospital, an inexplicable feeling of palpitation suddenly emerged from his heart. Then, Bullseye saw the empty hospital corridor in front of him, with blood rushing towards him. Come. As the most powerful killer under Jin Bing, Bullseye thinks that he is already a murderer, but facing this very different scene in front of him, there is an emotion called fear in his heart. In the next instant, everything in the corridor disappeared like an illusion. Could it be? Although everything disappeared, Bullseye did not think that what he had experienced before was just the hallucinations he had in the mental hospital. Mental illness is not an infectious disease. So, the only possible explanation is that, following the direction of the blood gushing out from his eyes, Bullseye passed the hospital corridor that suddenly fell into silence, and finally found a closed iron door in a location that was obviously a basement. With dexterous fingers, the iron door can be easily opened. Holding the handle in his hand, he pulled the iron door open, and the next second he saw a figure with a newspaper in his hand sitting on the toilet. Noticing that someone appeared, the other party subconsciously blocked it with a newspaper. Bullseye. Under the dim light, Jin and holding a cane, the huge body is shrouded in the darkness, appearing mysterious and terrifying. However, his expression at the moment was not very good. The subordinates on the side noticed Jin Bing's gloomy face, took a step back subconsciously, and swallowed. In the hall of the Handhold Stronghold, surrounded by dozens of ninjas and gang members, an old man with few hair on his head, wearing a tattered vest and light blue flip-flops, was reading the newspaper with his legs crossed. It seems that all kinds of things in front of him do not affect him. In a low voice, Jin Bing said coldly, "Are you sure you didn't find the wrong person?" Mrs. Gao's old face was a little unbearable. She coughed, leaned on crutches and walked in front of the Huiyan evil god, and asked in a hoarse voice, "I heard that you are the legendary ultimate murderer, Huiyan evil god." The old man put down the newspaper in his hand and replied casually, "It's just a false name." Bullseye winked, and a muscular black boy walked out from the gang on the side. He came to Huiyan evil god and looked at the old man with no flesh on his body. His face was full of disdain. "Old guy, who do you think you are, dare to speak like that here? Who are you?" Bang. Those who joined the gang were not good-tempered in the first place. Hearing the casual reply of the evil spirits, the black man who was originally violent suddenly couldn't hold back his temper, and punched the opponent's face with a punch. Looking at the evil god who was punched in a crooked face by the black man, Mrs. Gao couldn't help frowning. Even Bullseye, seeing this scene, couldn't help but wonder if he had made a mistake. Straightening his head, looking at the black man with the big and the third thick, the evil spirit raised his eyebrows and said contemptuously, "Looking at how long you are, you don't even have the strength to say that you belong to a gang." The words of Huiyan evil god immediately angered the black man on the opposite side. He turned his head and glanced at Jin Bing behind him, saw Jin Bing lightly decapitating, and immediately took out a gun from his body to turn the head of the evil god. However, in the next second, the black man felt that his hand was empty, and the gun actually reached the old man in front of him. The black man retreated in horror, and the ninjas and subordinates around him took out their guns. The evil god smiled, holding the gun at Jin Bing. The next moment, countless firearms spewed flames, but Fire Cloud evil god has turned into an afterimage, waving both hands in the air. The sound of gunfire fell, and the evil spirit fluttered back to a chair not far away and sat down. He smiled. His hands were spread out forward, and the sound of dong 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 lingered endlessly. All martial arts in the world are invincible, only fast is invincible. Famousness from Mrs. Gao +265. Famousness from Jinbian +195. Famousness from Bullseye +275. Famousness from Hand Ninja +2. Because of the Purple Man's accident, the defenders had to spend more time recuperating and adjusting their status. A few days later, the recovered Matt couldn't wait to start the action with the other members of the defenders. The Hand will exist in Hell's Kitchen for another day, and he has more worries in his heart, especially now, the real purpose of the Hand's presence in New York remains unclear. Following the clues, I came to a stronghold of the Hand Union. During the battle, Matt keenly discovered something different. Do you feel that these guys don't seem to be as crazy as usual today? Flying in midair, Jessica also felt a slight difference. Are they going to give up? Luke Cage raised his hand and grabbed the muzzle aimed at himself, breaking it into a twisted shape. The owner of the smashing gun, Yu asked in a free voice. No, it's not giving up, their approach is more like stalling time. Matt shook his head, waving the guide stick in his hand to hit the belly of the opposite ninja, and at the same time quickly swept the opponent to the ground, sideways. Procrastinating, it's possible that they have some secret weapon. Falling from the air and kicking a gangster, Jessica raised her eyebrows and replied, at the same time turning her head to face Wei a little far away. Slee complained, can't you join our discussion? The bullets flying in the air turned into beautiful arcs and hit the heads of the hand-joined ninjas one by one. Wesley silently changed the magazine in his hand, and said with words like gold, "In the battle, you need to concentrate." "Well, when I didn't say it." Seeing this, Jessica shrugged and said helplessly. Anyway, everyone tried to be careful. With an increasingly uneasy premonition in his heart, Matt couldn't help but remind the members of the defenders aloud. Noticing Matt's solemn expression, Jessica also restrained the expression on her face and nodded to make it clear. Here comes the bullseye. After the fierce battle, there are fewer and fewer ninjas and gang members in front of the hand. At this moment, Matt noticed the familiar cracking sound in the air, and immediately shouted. "Old rules." In midair, Jessica said without looking back. The so-called old rule, of course, is that Wesley's hands are used to contain bullseye. Nodding lightly, Wesley immediately swung his muzzle and drew a graceful arc. However, in the face of Wesley's arc ballistics threat, Bullseye uncharacteristically neither blocked nor evaded, and still stood firmly in place. What happened? Not far away, Luke Cage, who was in the battle, saw this scene, and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, forgetting that the ninja who counterattacked directly on the opposite side slashed straight. Raising his hand, he directly reduced the height of the attacking ninja by about 10 centimeters. Luke Cage couldn't help but said, could it be that he suddenly couldn't think of it and decided to commit suicide? Seeing that the arc-shaped bullet was about to hit Bullseye's head, Wesley, who was not far away, frowned slightly. Just then, an arm stretched out from behind Bullseye and lightly clamped the flying bullet. Famousness from Jessica +110. Fame from Luke Cage +120. Is this the guy you're talking about? He let go of his fingers and threw the bullet in his hand on the ground. The evil god of fire cloud in a suit walked out from behind, glanced at the defenders in the battle on the opposite side, raised his eyebrows and said, "I'll be blunt, those present here. None of these guys is worth my shot." If possible, Lee Ran would actually like to see the scene where Bullseye is headshot if he doesn't shoot. However, the situation does not allow. In order to be able to perform smoothly, he must act to force this time. "Who's that guy? He looks pretty nasty." Falling from the air, Jessica came to Matt's side and asked. "I don't know, but I can feel that the other party is very dangerous. He caught my bullet with just 2 fingers. Wesley stepped back to the two with a solemn expression. "It turns out that you said so much." Although the incident of catching the bullet with bare hands was shocking, many of the defenders had extraordinary abilities to some extent, so Jessica did not retreat because of this. "Okay. I admit it's pretty cool to catch bullets with your hands, but we don't have a big guy here who can be directly bulletproof. So, don't worry too much, we have 4 against 1 here. To be precise, it's a group of them, come and beat the 4 of us," Luke Cage said with a splash of cold water. "Wait a moment." Raising his hand, he stopped the ninjas and gang members who were planning to re-encircle them. The evil spirit said lightly, "Since everyone is here, I will move my hands and feet by the way and do my best to help you solve everything. I'm starting to agree with what you said before, this guy is really bad." Luke Cage raised his eyebrows, rarely agreeing with Jessica's words. However, Bullseye had no doubts about what Huiyan Evil God said, and immediately said, "Then please, Evil God, as long as these guys can be dealt with, Jin will definitely not treat you badly." Evil God. On the opposite side, Matt keenly noticed the name of Bullseye, and the uneasiness in his heart suddenly expanded rapidly. "Are you the evil god of fire cloud?" "Oh, you actually know me." Hearing Matt's question, the evil god raised his mouth and revealed an unexpected smile. "I am worthy of putting so much effort into laying the groundwork." Legend from Daredevil +130. Famousness from Luke Cage +95. Huiyan Evil God, who is that? Of course, not everyone present knew the name. Jessica twitched her slender eyebrows and asked Matt and Luke Cage, who looked shocked. "A very dangerous person who seems to have the title of the ultimate murderer. A Xing came to New York from Penglai to find out about him," Luke Cage explained in a deep voice. "Axing." Hearing Luke Cage say Axing's name, Jessica's eyes changed, and then she looked at the evil god of fire clouds not far away. "So, he is indeed a crisis guy. You actually know about Penglai." Hearing the word Penglai coming out of Luke Cage's mouth, the evil god's casual expression suddenly became a little serious. "It seems that I have to use more force. Okay. Find out where you got the news about Penglai. Be careful, everyone, the other party may be more dangerous than any enemy we have encountered before." Hearing Huiyan evil god's words, Matt's heart rang loudly, and he quickly reminded his companions beside him. You don't need to say this, you can see it. He habitually retorted, but Jessica's expression at the moment was not as relaxed as the scene, especially after knowing that the strange guy in front of him was related to Peng Lai. I think at this time, we'd better retreat temporarily. Although it is absurd to play his own drama, the clone still played the role of Wesley very well, and suggested while making a solemn expression. Hearing this, the evil spirit smiled. Let's go, with me here, none of you want to leave. As the words fell, his figure appeared in front of Matt and the others in the next instant. What, so fast? Noticing the evil god in front of them, the defenders and his party couldn't help but be astonished. Matt's expression was particularly shocked, and even his super senses couldn't detect the movement of the evil god. Although the shock and the movement speed of the evil gods, the defenders and others are not easy, the past successive battles made them respond quickly. Luke Cage quickly stood up to the front, and Wesley shot in the back to shoot. Well, shoot yourself. The arc-shaped bullets flew around Luke Cage's broad back and flew out from a blind spot that the evil god could not see. However, for this mysterious and unpredictable attack, the heretic god seemed to casually stretch out his hand and grab the bullet from the bend in his hand. He said disdainfully, "Bring out some real itself, bullets, it's useless to me." The legend from Daredevil +75. Famousness from Luke Cage +60. Famousness from Jessica +55. Witnessing the scene of one hand grabbing a bullet at close range. Even the defenders and others couldn't help being shocked. Li Ran, who was far away in the antique store, was delighted by the successive rumors, but he was somewhat regretful. Unfortunately, Wesley was his clone. How shocking. Although there are some regrets, the live performance will continue. Restraining the shock in his heart, Luke Cage made the first move, raised his fist as big as a sandbag and smashed it towards the evil god in front of him. In the face of this powerful blow, the evil god smiled, raised his hand and landed on Luke Cage. After taking the attack of the fire cloud evil god, even with the invulnerable defense, Luke Cage still felt a dull feeling in his chest. Hey, horizontal practice kung fu. Feeling the strange feeling of hitting Luke Cage, Huiyan evil god raised his eyebrows, a little surprised. He said strangely in his mouth, but there was no hesitation in the movements of the evil god's hands. In the next second, he rushed in front of Luke Cage with a rapid step, and then waved his palms like afterimages towards the opponent's body. Called, "I want to see how hard your body is." Facing the continuous slaps of the evil god, Luke Cage was like a huge sandbag and was powerless. He kept waving his arms to block the attack, but he couldn't catch up with the opponent's speed. Boom. In the end, with a dull loud noise, Luke Cage's tall figure flew out and slammed into the wall before falling. It turned out not to be horizontal training, but the skin is a little thicker. The evil god looked at Luke Cage, who flew out, and said lightly, "Wow." On the other side, Luke Cage, who fell on the ground, struggled to get up, but felt a sharp pain all over his body, and blood spurted out of his mouth. Fame from Luke Cage +225. Luke, seeing that Luke Cage, who has been invulnerable to bullets and even bullets, was beaten and vomited blood under the attack of Fire Cloud Evil God. Jessica couldn't help being shocked when she saw this scene. She looked back at the Fire Cloud Evil God standing in place, clenched her fists, and the next second, the person was already floating in the air. "Jessica, don't." Aware of Jessica's actions, Matt hurriedly opened his mouth to stop it, but apparently the other party did not follow his advice. Interesting. Obviously I haven't learned any immortal methods, but I can actually fly in midair." Looking up, looking at Jessica floating in the air, the evil god said with great interest. "The more interesting thing is yet to come, old guy." Hearing Huiyan evil god's words, Jessica replied coldly. With the advantage of flying, she kept picking up the heavy objects on the ground and slammed it towards the evil god. Boom. Sideways, dexterously avoiding what Jessica threw from midair, Huiyan evil god turned his head and glanced at the ground that had been smashed into deep and shallow potholes. Flying with superpower is indeed a good way to attack, but for the Fire Cloud Cthulhu, these methods are not much of a threat. He looked up at Jessica, who was hanging above his head, and the Cthulhu said with a look of disdain, "Smashing things, child tricks, and, if you really think you fly into the sky, I can't help you." After saying that, Huiyan evil god waved his palm and lifted it upwards, and golden light flashed in his hand. In an instant, only a burst of Sanskrit sounds could be heard. Jessica, who was in midair, fell from the sky like a heavy blow. At the moment Jessica fell, the evil god came to Matt and the clone Wesley in a flash, and with his palms, he double-clicked the two and flew out. Of course, he deliberately restrained the force of the palm that hit Wesley, so as not to use too much force and directly break the clone. It's boring, it's boring. The evil god put his hands behind his hands, looked at the fallen defenders in front of him, shook his head, and his expression was extremely dissatisfied. It's not challenging at all. If you come out to do this thing, it's better to stay in a mental hospital. Interesting. The Huiyan evil god said so, in fact, to give Matt and the others a little time on the opposite side. After all, the difference in strength between the two sides is too high. If you don't stop and leave some gaps, they will kill you after a few efforts. How can you continue playing? Although Li Ran needs fame, he is not so mad, kind of degree. However, how to release the water without showing any signs is also a difficulty. Glancing over Wesley, who was standing opposite, he began to get up at all, wondering if he was going to repeat the previous routine, sacrificing a clone to prevent the evil god from escaping. Here, Li Ran is arranging the drama for the next plot development. On the other side, Bullseye looked at the evil god with an invincible and lonely expression, and couldn't help but remind him. Evil god, can you solve them? If you don't want to, I can do it for you. Right now, the defenders group fell down, injured, and they didn't have much resistance at all. Did I let you do it again? He glanced sideways at the bullseye beside him, and the evil spirit said lightly, or, do you think I have no ability to kill a few of them? No, that's not what I meant. To the evil god's gaze, even if the other party's expression was indifferent, Bullseye unconsciously felt a heart palpitation for a while, and lowered his head subconsciously. This is the existence of being able to catch bullets with only one hand, and his ability to play throwing is simply not enough to see in front of the evil god. Trouble, it seems that we can only top it with Wesley. Nodding, on the surface, Huiyan evil god didn't seem to care. In the antique shop, Li Ran had already made a decision secretly. The evil god took a step and walked to Matt, who was lying on the ground. He opened his mouth and said something by the way. Suddenly, he felt that a figure began to approach their position. Well, maybe this is an opportunity. With a move in his heart, Li Ran hurriedly asked Wesley, who was planning to get up, to lie back again, and on the other side continued to use the evil spirit to say, to be honest, you guys are more casual than I thought, and I didn't make any effort, I've already fallen, so that big guy has some ability and caught me a few times. After speaking, the evil spirit squatted down and looked at Matt lying on the ground. Then, tell me, that's how you know it. Peng Lai, how did you know about me? Do you think I'll tell you? Fire Cloud evil god's attack is quite severe. Even though the blow on Matt has already taken a lot of strength, it is obviously quite heavy. Matt struggled to get up from the ground while gritting his teeth. Road. Since you don't want to say, then I can only send you to die. Quote. Shaking his head and sighing, the evil god raised his palm and was about to pat Matt. In the antique store, Li Ran began to pinch the time, manipulating another clone, Wesley, to get ready, and let him make amends in case someone didn't do his best. Seeing, this palm is about to hit Matt on the body. In the distance, Luke Cage struggled to rush over regardless of his injury. The next second, I heard Bullseye's voice from behind, Cthulhu, be careful. Turning his head, he saw a man with blonde curly hair, waving his golden fists and attacking him. It was Iron Fist. In the antique store, Li Ran raised his eyebrows when he saw the figure that appeared. Although it is not clear how the other party found this place, Li Ran really wanted to praise Danny for finding it well. With the emergence of Iron Fist, the next development will naturally be smoother, which is much more reasonable than the sacrifice of Wesley that I thought before. Theoretically, in the face of the Iron Fist's attack, Huiyan evil god was completely able to react and fight back, but he deliberately did not choose to shoot, but let Danny's Iron Fist hit him. In the next instant, the evil god was blasted out like a cannonball from the boring, and the whole person slammed into the wall beside him. Before, when Danny and Yi Wen were fighting, he deliberately limited the strength of the opponent's Iron Fist and did not allow the opponent to make a successful shot. Now that I think about it, that's pretty sensible. By taking the power of the legendary Kunlun Guardian from the body of the Fire Cloud evil god, it was discovered that the power of the Iron Fist was indeed well deserved. The successor Danny himself is quite weak. Thinking of this, Li Ran is somewhat speechless. The legendary Kunlun, and the so-called Kung Fu master Lei Gong have spent more than 10 years of Kung Fu training to achieve such a level, and such a level can still inherit the legendary Iron Fist, the power of Kunlun. How short of manpower is it? But then again, thanks to Danny's strength as an Iron Fist, it's nothing. It was only because the avatar of the Huiyan evil god was under the punch, there was no situation of overturning. Yes, keep playing the trick. Boom. After deliberately staying behind the wall for a while, the heretic god slammed away the wall that was pressing on him and stood up from the pile of rubble. After patting the dust all over his body, Huiyan evil god's gaze swept over the position where the defender was before, and asked Bullseye with a blank expression, "Where are they?" "I was rescued by the person who suddenly appeared before." Bullseye was worried that the evil god would be injured by this sudden blow, and seeing his innocent face, he replied quickly, "Who are you?" With Danny's help, the defenders went to a closed Mexican restaurant in Hell's Kitchen to take shelter. Covering the wound on his body that was hit by the fire cloud evil god, Matt gritted his teeth and asked the man who suddenly appeared in front of him. "My name is Danny Rand." Standing at the door of the restaurant and looking at the situation outside, Danny turned to Matt and said, "Are you the billionaire?" Holding on to the injury on her body and putting down Luke Cage's cumbersome body, Jessica raised her slender eyebrows in surprise as she looked at the man's appearance. "If you're talking about the Rand Group, it's really me." Nodding, Danny didn't deny it. "Why did you appear in the stronghold of the Hand, and why did you help us?" He moved his body, and the severe pain on his body made Matt cough subconsciously. He clenched the guide stick in his hand and continued to ask. "Danny, I was attacked by hand ninjas in Cambodia, and I was told the truth I was looking for was in New York." "Matt, why did the Hand attack you?" Danny shook his head and said, "It's not clear yet, but it's probably related to the power I have." "What power do you have?" Thinking of the scene when Danny knocked the fire cloud evil god into the air with one punch, Jessica couldn't help but say, "The ability to glow in your hands." Danny opened his mouth and corrected, "That's an Iron Fist, from the power of the Guardian of Kunlun." "Kunlun," Matt repeated after noticing the words in Danny's words. "Compared to these, I think it's better to think about it first. How to deal with the fire cloud evil god is the most important thing." Luke Cage said, "He was the most seriously injured by several people, and his invulnerable body could block bullets but could not resisting the powerful palm of the evil god. We are not his opponents at all." Fire cloud evil god. Hearing Luke Cage's words, Danny couldn't help but blurt out, "I really want to hear this name." "You know, from where?" Jessica wondered. "One from Peng Lai, called Yi Wen." Danny murmured back, and at the same time fell into memory. "Master Yi, why did you come to New York?" After a short fight, Danny clearly recognized the gap between himself and Yi Wen, and the other party gave him the feeling that he was like a master in Kunlun, and he had a little goodwill out of thin air. In order to find a person and find out the truth at the same time. Yi Wen nodded lightly and replied, "The truth, Yi Wen, a disciple of Peng Lai had an accident in New York, so I came here specially to find the truth." Danny, hope you can find your answer. What about you, young man, what is your purpose? I can see that you are a little confused. Facing Ip Man's question, Danny hesitated for a while before slowly replying, "I was attacked in Cambodia. After investigation, I found that all this came from an organization called the Hand, but I don't know why they just like you, Master Yi. I am also looking for the truth. Then, I wish you to find out the truth as soon as possible." Yi Wen nodded with his hands clasped. "You too, Master Yi." Danny replied in a similar fashion. "By the way, Master Yi, who is the person you just said you were looking for?" Danny couldn't help asking, remembering the first half of what Yi Wen said before. "A dangerous existence named Fire Cloud Evil God." Fire Cloud Evil God ran away. At the stronghold of the Hand Association, Mrs. Gao came to the scene and looked at the collapsed wall with a look of surprise. She originally thought that the evil god of Fire Cloud made a move. Dealing with the defenders is completely a matter of 100%. What happened? Her eyes were silently withdrawn from the wall, and Mrs. Gao glanced at the silent evil spirit frowning in the distance, then turned her head and asked the Bullseye beside her. "Something went wrong," Bullseye said, telling Mrs. Gao what had happened before. Suddenly, a guy with golden fists appeared and rescued those guys. Golden light from both fists. Bullseye's words made Mrs. Gao's hand holding the crutches tighten. Such a description reminded her of a figure that the Hand Club had been looking for in recent times, Iron Fist. Sure enough, Iron Fist has come to New York. Suppressing the excitement in her heart, Mrs. Gao tried her best to maintain a consistent expression on her face, and was about to continue asking, "Can you know? It looks like your plan failed, Mrs. Gao." With a hoarse voice, an equally thin man appeared at the stronghold of the hand. "How did you come?" Frowning, Mrs. Gao looked at the reappearing figure and couldn't help but said coldly, "Didn't I already say it before? I will handle everything." "In the beginning, that's what I thought too. After all, you are the most experienced in this area among us." Step by step, he stopped in front of Mrs. Gao. The standing Huiyan evil god stopped for a while. However, time waits for no one. "I think you also feel that time is running out, and your recent series of actions have cost us a lot of manpower. After discussions, the rest of us agreed that you need help. However, I have found the clue of Iron Fist." Mrs. Gao lowered her voice. Her expression was a little unhappy, and the appearance of the skinny old man meant that the remaining leaders of the Hand Union had distrusted her. "But you haven't brought him to us yet." Shaking his head, the old man turned his head and glanced at the evil god standing not far away. "Is this the so-called helper you found? Be careful, he can't be provoked by you." Ignoring Madame Gao's warning, the old man walked to the evil god of fire clouds, looked at the bald man covered in dust, and said lightly, "I heard that you let someone run away." The Huiyan evil god came back to his senses, looked at the skinny old man who was screaming in front of him, turned his head and asked Madame Gao, "Who is he?" "He, like me, is the leader of the Hand Society." After a deep look at the old man, Mrs. Gao lowered her head. "Didn't you hear me?" Seeing that the heretic god didn't answer, the old man frowned. Raising his hand, he turned the thin old man's head in a 360-degree turn with one palm. The Huiyan evil god walked over to Madame Gao, ignoring the ninjas around him who drew their swords and guns at him. "From today onwards, I am the new owner of your hand association. Famousness from Murakami plus 800. Famousness from Mrs. Gao plus 320. Legend from Bullseye plus 285. Peng Lai?" Yi asked. Danny's answer revealed a lot of information, especially the name Ip Man. It reminded Matt of what Xing had said before. He remembered what the other party had said about Master Yi. As expected of a superhero with super senses, it did not disappoint me. Wesley has been silently observing Matt's reaction, and seeing him frown in confusion, he knows that his previous preparations were not in vain. "Why, have you heard of this name?" Danny also noticed Matt's reaction and couldn't help asking. Quote. Hearing this, Matt was silent for a while before saying, "A previous friend from Peng Lai once mentioned the name Master Yi." "What about him now?" Danny glanced at the defenders in front of him and couldn't help but ask. Danny's words made the atmosphere in the Mexican restaurant suddenly become silent a lot. Jessica turned her head. Luke Cage covered his chest that was hit by the fire cloud evil god, and replied in a low voice, "Dead, we encountered an ambush in the previous battle with the hand." Noticing the expressions of the defenders, Danny immediately said, "Sorry." However, he immediately thought of the conversation between Yi Wen and him before. "I see, no wonder Master Yi once said that he came to New York on purpose because Peng Lai's disciple had an accident." He also mentioned about the evil god of fire cloud. Noticing the content of Danny's words, Jessica's long-lost private detective intuition finally came online, and she looked back at the defenders who were not intact in the restaurant. "Guys, I think, I don't need to say more about the previous situation. Everyone knows, we were beaten all over the floor by the so-called fire cloud evil god, and Matt was almost beaten to death in front of us by him. So, what do you want to say?" Luke Cage. Jessica. "I mean, in this case, why don't we find an existence that can deal with the evil god of fire clouds, such as the Master Yi you mentioned? He is from Peng Lai just like Xing, and he is specifically for that. The guy here should know the Huiyan evil god better than us." "Well done, Jessica." Jessica's remarks successfully led the topic to Yi Wen. Indirectly, it saved a lot of effort for Li Ran. Nodding his head, Li Ran echoed through Wesley's mouth, "The evil god of fire cloud is too dangerous. If the next battle is not as passive as it is today, we really need more information." Jessica and Wesley succeeded in persuading Matt. He turned to Danny who was standing at the door and asked, "Do you know where Master Yi ended up going? So, tell me the purpose of your hand union." Hand meeting. Huiyan evil god sat casually on the high chair, resting his chin in one hand, looking down at Madame Gao and the three remaining leaders of the hand. Looking up, he glanced at the evil god on the high chair. Murakami's lessons learned, and the powerful force displayed by the other party made Mrs. Gao and the others dare not act rashly. Especially, with the decline of the power of immortality in the body and the exhaustion of the keel of resurrection from the dead, now is the time when they are the most vulnerable. We are looking for Iron Fist, that is, the person who appeared in the battle to attack you before. We need his strength to open a sealed door, to gain the power to continue to maintain our immortality. Speaking of immortality, Mrs. Gao subconsciously raised her head to look at the expression of Huiyan Evil God, but did not find any unexpected expression on his face. Immortal, like those old guys in Peng Lai. After changing his sitting position, Huiyan Evil God looked up and down Mrs. Gao and others, and said in a light tone, but obviously. Compared with the immortal powers of Peng Lai, the so-called immortality in your mouth is not worth mentioning at all. After all, it only depends on external forces. Quote, "You don't know at all the greatness of this power." Hearing the words of the heretic god with faint sarcasm, finally the leader of the Hand Society couldn't bear it any longer. As the leaders of the Hand, they were not content to be under the evil gods. This is the power that can control and change the world. For countless centuries, we have witnessed one war after another, and seen the revival and decline of one civilization after another. Time is the world, the most terrifying force in the world. No one can escape except us. Aren't you guys about to be caught up now? The evil god twitched the corners of his mouth and looked at the Hand Union leader in front of him. This is only temporary. In the end, victory will still be on our side. The leader twitched his cheeks and replied with force. Silently withdrawing his gaze, Huiyan Evil God suddenly opened his mouth as if muttering to himself, "I suddenly feel that there are too many leaders of the Hand Association. In fact, for me, only one obedient one is enough." Quote. The words of the evil god of Fire Cloud caused the expressions of Madame Gao and the others below to change suddenly. However, before they could react, the evil god who was still on the high chair appeared like a ghost in front of Mrs. Gao and the others. Compared to Murakami, who had no ability to counterattack before and was killed by Huiyan Evil God, the remaining leaders of the Hand Association were obviously still a little bit like that. After all, after living for such a long time, even if there is no talent, a long time can make up for everything. Running the mysterious power that maintains immortality in the body, the leaders of the Hand Association attacked together and attacked the evil god fiercely. Unfortunately, all this does not change anything. Looking at the few people calling towards him in front of him, the heretic god didn't even need to evade, and attacked extremely quickly with his palms, accompanied by bursts of Sanskrit sounds all over his body. The battle was over in an instant. Famousness from Alexandra plus 900. Famousness from Botuso plus 750. Legend from Wanda plus 1000. Following a series of rumors, the Huiyan Evil God has returned to the high chair, looking at the only Mrs. Gao left at the bottom, and said indifferently, "Look, this makes things much easier. Pass on the order and give it to me. Find out about those people." Glancing at the figures around her, Mrs. Gao looked at these practical companions who had lived with her for several times, but now they have ended up like this under the hands of Huiyan Evil God. She tried her best to maintain her emotions, using her slightly trembling voice. Holding the cane in front of her tightly, Madame Gao bowed her head deeply, and should not look directly at the evil god of fire clouds sitting on the high chair. She replied in a hoarse and sharp voice, "I know, everything will be as it is. As you wish, evil god. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe for more videos."